person's existence and actions.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Friday, this wonderful start to your weekend, and welcome to this BVT Tech Summit 2023. Very good morning to you all, and a big welcome to this BVT Tech Summit 2023. Of course, was to be an annual event, has been held a couple of times before, interrupted by the pandemic, and we're all delighted that it's back on now. The theme, Building a Sustainable and Digitalized Future for Indonesia, in partnership with the British Chamber of Commerce, Technology and Digitization Hub, and Castle Asia Group as well. Just a few house points for you all. We'll show you the rundown in just a moment, but just to let you know, pretty casual, pretty free. If you'd like to go and grab a tea or coffee at any stage and bring them back to your table, you're very welcome to do that. There are 5 fairly fast and furious, very much to the point and full of impact panels, and the short gap in between each of those as well. Again, that's an opportunity for a comfort break for you if you'd like that, and again, come back to your tables. Ladies and gentlemen, for a large number of us, we are guests here in Indonesia. Others are, of course, Indonesian nationals, and it's often a very welcome mark of respect for us to stand and recognize the national anthem, Indonesia Raya, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you very much. Please take your seats. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start the program. Just a few thoughts from me. I'm Chris Wren. I'm the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce here in Indonesia, and very pleased, together with Castle Asia, to be associated with this BVT Tech Summit 2023. As far as the Chamber is concerned, the whole issue of technology and digitalization is very much at the front and center of a lot of our thinking. And it was just last week that our chairman, Pat Donny, who's here now, inaugurated the Technology and Digitization Hub for the British Chamber of Commerce, which is being led by one of your moderators today, Ian Betts, and also a leading member of the committee is, in fact, Martin Terpolowski as well. I was very, very curious when I saw the title, Building a Sustainable and Digitalized Future for Indonesia. Not curious about that, but the tag that came below, the potential benefits of location analytics. I'm not quite sure why we're debating about potential when we're thinking about benefits. Anyone who's been in marketing will remember from years and years and years ago, thousands and thousands of pounds and dollars have been invested in what was the 3 Ps to start with, became the 4 Ps, 5 Ps, 6 Ps, and I don't know how many Ps there are now if you go to college. But the whole issue of location, positioning, has been a major preoccupation for any business, and very often is the key thing that underpins and underwrites and predicts the success of the future of a business. But I'm not really that well qualified to talk about that and the BVT role in helping businesses in Indonesia to optimize the potential from the opportunities. Instead, I would like to defer to founder and president commissioner of PT Bumi Vata Technology, that is Martin Terpolowski. Martin.
It's on already. I need a better picture there. I need to be smiling, I think, for starters, right? Right, so thanks a lot for everybody. Welcome our panelists, our VIPs, our guests, everybody who's made the effort this morning. We know that these events are becoming more and more regular now, and I think it's becoming harder and harder to organize because there's so much in people's diaries. But thank you for coming out and making the effort today. So why are we doing a summit? Well, I think BVT is a deep technology company, so we're probably not known as well as the B2C software that you guys see every day, the Gojeks of this world, all the financial apps. But what we're actually doing is creating software within Indonesia, and we're building deep tech software. We're not white labeling anything. We're building it from scratch in BSD, and that's actually very unusual in Indonesia. So we believe, as a leader in technology in Indonesia, we should be holding summits like this. We should be bringing the top people together. We should be bringing clients together. We should be explaining to people, because often when I first talk about our software, people say, we've never used it in the past. Why do we have to use this now? You don't have to use it now, but globally everyone uses geospatial software. So yes, you may be a market leader in Indonesia. However, there is a reason that every global company is using geospatial software. And we do believe that even though it's an early stage at the moment, we believe that it's going to become a big thing in the future. And as the only local geospatial company, we expect to have a real positive impact on the future of this country. So this is Indonesia landscape of technology. There is so many technology companies, and everyone is always talking about tech in Indonesia, but a lot of this obviously is enabling apps. So it's the vast majority is B2C, and that's mainly because venture capital money has been available for B2C. It hasn't been available for B2B, One of the reasons is you have to build the product from scratch. So in years 1 and 2, we had absolutely no revenue. And then after that, we had to come and start building software start building our clients. Now, special shout out to people like Janji Jiwa, XXI Cinema, who took a risk on us very early, despite the fact most people in this country had never come across what we were doing. I don't know what's happened there. But yeah, so we believe that this is great, but we talk about sustainability. I would say less than 5% of companies on there have ever made a profit. This is quite a crazy situation we live in. That technology, the concept of technology is to make the life easier, but is an app for everything, making life easier really? And where are we looking at for profitability? Because there just isn't in the B2C market. There's very, very few examples of profitability. There's a lot of businesses doing exactly the same thing, MSMEs. It's a great noble cause, but it's very hard to make money from MSMEs. It hasn't been done in other countries globally. Financial inclusion, again, I would question there's a reason that a lot of the banks have not dealt with these people because profitability is difficult. So I think, yes, it's great to have tech, but where is the real level of digitalization? Why are we talking about digitalizing MSMEs when in a lot of respects, the government and the major corporations here do not have very strong technology? Next slide. I've got my slide thing. Oh, here we are. So yeah, recently Djokovic asked the ministries to stop making new applications. This might shock you, but there's 27,000 applications currently being used by the Indonesian government. It's kind of mind-blowing, and I think one of the issues here is the way that corporate runs as well. When I was in corporate before, we have a roadmap for technology. It doesn't matter if the head of digitalization changes, there is a roadmap, 5, 10 years roadmap. Here, it seems to me there's a change in personnel, and things change a lot. Everyone has a different project every year, project-based. No roadmap, nothing that can, like, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to achieve this, because this year we'll buy this software from here, this year we'll buy our software from here. There's too many applications, too many doing the same thing. It's costing money, it's not making any revenue. Companies' concept of making their own software, everybody keeps telling me they're gonna build their own software. It just doesn't happen. It just hasn't happened in the past, because even in Europe, big companies like DHL, they don't build their own geospatial software. They use software from Esri or Supermap. They don't build their own. So this concept that when we go and see people, or we'll do it ourselves, it's too expensive. It's gonna cost you $20 million to build. So is it too expensive? How much does it add to your revenue? What's the cutting in costs when you can absolutely guarantee the foot traffic in a certain location? So I think we talk about digitalization in Indonesia, and I think, to be honest, it's totally overblown. I think the level of digitalization is still very low. And I think just starting an app, which could be like a school project, is not digitalization. It's not going to make a difference to the future of the country. It's not going to add huge amounts of, profit to the organizations. So I think this is something quite senior. We can have as much different apps as possible, but there needs to be some sustainability and some long-term roadmap. So this event is not about BVT, it's about technology. But just for some of you guys who won't know about BVT, because as I said, I'm quite loud, but we are a B2B provider. So we're not like, we don't advertise on the side of buses or, in elevators. We're very careful how we market our product, like today, inviting clients. But we started in 2018 with 4 people in a very small serviced office in BSD. We now have 150 people in 2 buildings in BSD, and we have some of the biggest clients in Indonesia and global clients, which you'll see in a minute. So people we've worked with include some of the biggest companies here. And this is our mission. Again, I'm not a tech person, I'm a finance guy. I was in Tokyo and Hong Kong in finance for 16 years. But when I first sat down with actually the ex-science minister in Indonesia, Kusmianto Kadiman, and I talked to Pak Luhut's children about this business, and it made total sense to me when I looked at the opportunity when Indonesia is logistically challenged, there's huge amounts of data, and it's in a complete mess. So if we can put all that together in one platform and use economies of scale, I do believe that it's a huge benefit to the government and to the large corporations in Indonesia. So this is what we plan to do. Using geospatial technology, big data analytics, we can actually help companies really innovate and make profitability. So very quickly, again, with what we do, we basically have we create our own software, GIS software. We combine it with all the big data. This is from BPS, Doug Chappell, telco companies, and we put it together with machine learning. I know AI has become the flavor of the month, but we've been using machine learning since 2019, 2020, where we put the data, and the software here helps predict based on the data. So give a very simple example. Kopi Janji Jiwa looked at their top 10 stores in Jakarta. What were the commonalities about those stores? Were they near the hospital, near the coffee shop? Where were they? What kind of population? Man, woman, age group? All this kind of thing they knew from their current success, what was working. We put that into our system, and our system, based on the big data, made predictions where they should open in second and third cities. So Malang, all these Solo, and therefore they've had a lot of success. Similar with XXI, they know their target client. We are not consultants, but what we can do is we can find their target client, and we are doing that all the time. Yeah, very quickly, again, if anyone wants more information on this, I have all my sales team on the tables. We can send this to you. This is more about tech than about BVT, but I do want to make it about the wider market. But I just want to, we've got these examples of what we're doing. I think there's people here today from Astra, outstanding each point of outlet location, distribution. Of course, this is very important to many kinds of companies. Jiwa I've mentioned already, Relx, vaping, the most popular thing in Indonesia right now. We basically are predicting Relx where they should put their booths based on the big data. Routing optimization, I think recently Pak Luhut said that Indonesia has the highest cost of supply chain in the world. 26% of all your product costs is basically supply chain. We believe that can be cut by 10% by just simply using GIS software, by optimizing the route, making sure you are putting your distribution centers in the right place, by sequencing. I mean, you'll know there's far more qualified people than me to talk about this, and I believe they're talking about it later. But yeah, for me, it's pretty common sense that if you actually have the data and you have software to make predictions, this is going to help your business. So this is some of the companies we've worked with since 2018. So you'll see, some big places there. I mean, government, and we've worked with telecom, property, lots of different kind of companies. So it's a really wide range. Kraft Heinz, and I think what we'd say, we are industry agnostic, but anything which links big data to geographical position to allow companies to make better decisions is the area we are in. And I believe we can be highly successful at it. McDonald's, obviously, is another big brand. And we have got people in the room today that we're currently talking to. And I believe that in the next few months, we'll have more and more clients. Because the more use cases you have, of course, we started from scratch. It wasn't easy. We've made mistakes, I'm not a tech guy. I brought in people who were tech guys. We had false starts. Things went wrong. Things, don't always work out the way you think they're going to work. But I think if you look at 5 years on October the 8th, we've had quite a large achievement from a startup company with no venture capital funding at all. This is basically funded by myself and my friends. And I think it's quite a good achievement. So any questions you guys have, I'd like to thank everyone again for today, because this has been probably the hardest event I've ever organized. Last minute people canceling, last minute people changing, people asking me to hold events on different days. So yeah, unfortunately, I find it funny, I was talking to Chris Wren a few weeks ago, and me and Chris were doing a panel discussion at the Ayana next door for Britcham. And I was on a panel, and there was a few other people there, and at the end of the day, at the last minute, people turn around and go, "Oh, sorry, I've got to do this." I think it was Pak Nadim, right? Pak Nadim went to the UK on the day. So yes, so if anyone knows about this event, it was originally planned for the 21st of June. But we had to change the date to the 21st of June because Sandy's team changed it because they were in Goa at the time. And they moved it to, they wanted me to do it the 7th of July. And then yesterday I find out that the president asked him to go to Papua. So quite frustrating, but anyway, he is still going to come on here now, I believe. So thanks a lot, guys. I'm going to leave you with Sandy, and God bless Indonesia. Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Hi, BVTers, panelists, moderators, attendees of BVT Tech Summit 2023, and my beloved friend, Martin. First and foremost, please accept my sincere apologies for not being able to join you physically today. An urgent official travel to Papua alongside our esteemed President Joko Widodo has required my presence. However, I have great confidence that all the panelists and attendees will thoroughly enjoy this grand occasions. I must say I am amazed at how Martin and his incredible team have managed to organize such an outstanding event in such a short span amount of time. Today, the theme of the BVT Tech Summit is building a sustainable and digitalized future for Indonesia. This topic is not only intriguing, but also of utmost importance. As we move forward in this era of rapid technological advancements, it is crucial that we focus on building a future that embraces the power of digitalizations. The potentials for innovations and progress in Indonesia is immense. And events like this summit serve as catalysts for exploring the opportunities that lies ahead. The dedications and vision of the Bumi Varta team are commendable. I firmly believe that Bumi Varta holds the potential to bring transformative changes to Indonesia's technological landscape. With their focus on sustainable development and digital solutions, they are poised to make a significant impact in shaping Indonesia's future. At last, I want to express my heartfelt hope that this event will foster connections and forge new partnerships. The potential for growth and innovations in Indonesia is boundless, and through such events, we can collectively work towards building a sustainable and digitalized future for our beloved nations. I look forward to hearing about the inspiring outcomes of the summit. Enjoy the event and see you soon, Martin.
Well, thank you very much, Pat Sandy. But we've heard that excuse before by ministers, haven't we? Called away by the president. We will forgive him. A lovely personalised message to BVT and everybody associated. Martin, when he was introducing BVT and its progress and its stakeholders, referred really to many questions. There are 5 expert panels today, and the sincere belief is that those panels will come back with some of the answers to some of those questions, and particularly as they are led by 2 very experienced moderators. The first of those moderators who'll take on 3 sessions is Sachin Gopalan. Sachin is founder and CEO of Indonesia Economic Forum currently. Sachin serves as President Director at Orbit Future Academy. Was CEO of Berita Satu Media Holdings from 2010 to 2015, and his experiences highlight his leadership, skills, and entrepreneurial spirit. A man with great experience and well qualified to moderate the first of the panels, and he will introduce his panelists. Please welcome Sachin.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Chris, for that very warm introduction. And welcome to all of you in the room today. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you, Martin, for the invitation to participate in the BVT Tech Summit. I think we have a very interesting set of 5 different topics to talk about. And I like the format of it being 30 minutes. It's all a 30-minute session, which helps us to make it very focused. And our panelists would therefore be able to talk in short sentences, to the point, and adding what I call surprise truths to the discussion today. So before I would like to we get started, I'd like to invite the panelists onto the stage. Please welcome Martin Terpilowski, Founder and President Commissioner of Bhumi Varta Technology. Martin, please take a seat. Free seating. I'd like to welcome Danny Kosasi, Founder and CEO of Dharma Digital Technologies. Hello, Danny, please. And our third panelist is Fiki Setiono, Country Lead of Cloud Microsoft. Welcome, Pa. So we'll get started. I have the team here for Jessica keeping me on track with the time. But I think before we get started, I think there were a few key messages that both Martin as well as Sandy Uno talked about today. We're talking about the future of investment tech, especially in the startup ecosystem of Indonesia. And you saw some good statistics that Martin presented as well. But have you realized that we are no longer talking about digitalization as we did 10 years ago, where the topic was about should we digitalize, how are we digitalizing? We have come way ahead in the game to now we talk about sustainability. Sustainability, I think, is the key word because startups have a very, I would say, dual kind of an effect. The more number of startups in a country, you see how the metrics are. They talk about, oh, now we've got 10 unicorns, we've got 5 unicorns, this country's got 20 unicorns. We've got so much investment coming into each country. And these are the kind of metrics that people talk about when they talk about a startup ecosystem. So they say Indonesia's ranking, for example, is number 1 or 2 in Southeast Asia, is anywhere from number 7 to number 41 globally. But are these meaningful ways of looking at the startup ecosystem? I think not, because the longevity of a startup ecosystem is even more important than the fact that there's a lot of money being thrown in and the rankings that they have and the number of unicorns, because even unicorns fail. And failure of digital companies in an economy has different kinds of impact. So the healthiness or the robustness and the sustainability factor is a lot more important than the size of an ecosystem or how many people are participating in it. I think the time has come now for us to start looking at different metrics in evaluating how the ecosystem should be built up. So with that kind of a background, I'd like for us to dig deep into the wisdom, insight, and experience of our 3 panelists here so that we can understand a little bit more about what should we really be looking at and what are the things that we should be focusing on in the next, I would say, the next coming 12 months, which is a reasonable time frame for a digital ecosystem. So getting started, my first question to the panel, and you can keep this short, the idea is that I'm not going to ask any one of you this question, but I'd like each of you to respond briefly on what's your view. So looking at the startup ecosystem in Indonesia, right? Do you have one thing that you'd like to comment about where it is now and where it's going? Just one thing that you can comment that you believe is unique to the startup ecosystem here in Indonesia, vis-a-vis many other parts of the world. Maybe Martin, you'd like to get started on that? We'll just get the mics ready.
It's okay, it's working. I still think, as I've said before, the biggest issue in startups in Indonesia is it's a very small ecosystem of people who are involved. So, you know, there's a lot of clever kids from ITB, from UGM, who maybe don't speak perfect English, maybe didn't go to Jakarta International School, but they are highly capable individuals. We have people from all walks of life working for us, because we're probably not one of the trendy unicorns. We have a girl who's visually impaired working for us. I think she's one of only 2 in the country. And I think the way for this ecosystem to increase, to get better and more sustainable, is to open it up to more players. Unfortunately, the venture capital money goes to each other's friends, actually, if you look at the facts. And because of that, very little has been based on profitability and actually the results being good. So there's been less focus on making a very good product and driving something for the future of the country. And unfortunately, a lot of startups have become a game of pass the bag. So it's not about, oh, we're going to make this amazing product. It's about, let's sell this to somebody else quickly. And that, I think, is quite dangerous for any kind of ecosystem.
Okay. Pa Danny, you would like to take your views on this?
All right, thank you. So I'd like to second to Martin that the ecosystem in startup right now facing really difficult time right now because of the winter tech and the tech winter and also the difficulty of getting more funds now. But it's not the point because nowadays, where are we right now in the startup ecosystem, that we're looking back into the basic fundamental of business, which is making money, not burning money. And then how we should look forward that we need to maintain the right amount and healthy business by looking at our cash flow. So the startup founders that now need to be told, whenever they like to build a startup, the first purpose is not to find investor, but the first purpose is to build a healthy and good fundamental business, which is creating customer and creating more money.
Thank you, Pa. Pa Vicky?
Yeah, thanks, Sachin. So for Microsoft, our top of mind here in the country, having the presence of 28 years in the country, our top of mind is, of course, we are in the defining era of technology where AI will play important role. And when it comes to startups, not just startups, through our partnership with OpenAI, as most of you probably have your hands on ChatGPT, and we bring the secure and private version through our cloud in Microsoft Azure. There is 2 things on how we see the excitement coming from the startup ecosystem, and what it actually means for them. What is the age of AI means for them? There is 2 things. Number 1, it's actually helping them on the productivity side, as what Padani said. The challenges, the macro challenges that the startup, not just startup spaces are heading into, it's all about doing more with less. And when it comes to productivity, it is where this startup ecosystem, even the VCs and corporate VCs, governments, educations, are looking to be more productive. That's number 1. And number 2, I learned firsthand from many of these startups, this generative AI era is about reinventing their competitive advantage. While each of these startup or even the most traditional industry, if you will, like educations, they have their competitive advantage, but it is the opportunity now to reinvent their competitive advantage. And there is two things on how we at Microsoft is very excited to see this coming forward.
Okay, so that's an interesting first round of comments. We can see that the conversation has moved beyond setting up or the establishment of digital startups, but it's going more into how can we keep them alive. But can I have a show of hands in the room of how many people here are from a startup? Do we have enough startup people here in the room? Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's less than 10. I would say that's 10% of the room who are from a startup. The reason I ask you this is because digital transformation is being experienced now in the second level, not by startups, but by companies that have existed for many years who are now going through digital transformation. And it's an important factor because these are companies who have been in business and not trying to solve the business existence issue, which startups are, right? Startups need to survive. They may be pioneers in technology, but do they have sustainable survival skills? Maybe not. While as companies that are existing in the room have to just transform digitally in order to modify their business model. It's a different game. However, there is a connect between them and the startups. So maybe I can ask, Martin, how do you see the connect between a startup and an existing company that's getting into digital? What's the connect? How do you think that the two should coexist?
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? A lot of companies now, like big corporates, you know, you talk to some of the biggest companies in Indonesia, and they want to be tech companies because they look at the valuations of the tech companies. Now, we're seeing those valuations plummet right now, but I think there's a lot of pressure from the family businesses here, and I see some of them here today. They want to be a tech company because they see the valuation of tech companies. But I think that's not necessarily the thing to do. I think what these big companies want to do is adopt proper technology. And that doesn't mean 1,000 different apps. That means focused roadmap, set out what you want to achieve in the next 5. When we started BVT, I had no tech background, but we weren't playing this game of 1 in 100. Let's see if it works. We had a clear roadmap. Now, there's been bumps along the way, but I think, with the big corporations, I think they need to adopt technology, and they have to decide whether they build it or buy it. Now, obviously, I'm in the camp where buying it is more sensible, because if you look across the world, big companies tend not to build their own geospatial software. It's something here. So I think there's got to be a lot more digitalization in the big corporations. There seems to be a lot of wish here to digitalize the mom and pop stores, which I always find very interesting, because most mom and pop stores don't want digitalizing in England. So why is there so much pressure to do that? And when the people pushing this, often in government, are not digitalized themselves, I think it's to get away from, to be honest, I think it's to get away from their lack of digitalization by pushing it to somebody else and saying, oh, let's get the mom and pop stores, let's get financial inclusion. But no, first of all, the way that big corporations are going to, as the market opens up in Indonesia, how these big businesses are going to get better is by embracing proper technology, not just the apps of 1,000 different companies, and looking at where we're going to be in 5 years. Where's our technology going to be in 10 years? And I think that's where I see, talking to some of these businesses here, of course it's slow adoption, because if you're a 100-year-old company and your grandfather started the business, or your great-grandfather, and you've been successful anyway, you don't necessarily know what's the right thing. But I think I think the big corporations need to look at deep technology, need to look at other countries, what works, what's been successful in other countries, because there is a reason people use some of these technologies elsewhere.
Yeah. So that actually is a good connect. You're saying the big boys are actually getting into digital transformation today. When I say big boys, I'm talking about the big companies that actually have already established market value, and they have customer relations, and they are now looking at how technology can help them. I actually want to go, would you like to add something here, Padani? Please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, may I add? So, I see how can we make the corporation and startup coexist is like marrying two people with prenup.
Yes.
So, because the startup is good at building technology and move fast, break things, etc., but don't have a really good business model. In the other way around, corporation have the market, have the customers, and also have a very good business model. But speaking of the bureaucracy, speaking of the difficulty in the organization, they're merely very, very difficult to embrace and adopt new technology.
Yeah.
So that's why the corporation must start first with looking at the value chain within the corporation, in which side of the value chain need to be assisted or in cooperation with a startup. So that's why I like to say that how to make it coexist is like marrying two people with prenup.
Good point, actually. So, I don't know, would you like to add something here, Bafiki, or can you take the next question, because I think it's related to what you're doing in Microsoft.
Sure.
Having said that, the coexistence of startups and existing large companies may be the starting point now going forward, because sustainability will come from some kind of a mix between people who have technology and people who have business. If you look at that, and Microsoft, I would say, is in the middle of all of these kind of conversations, because they deal with both. They deal with startups as well as they deal with large corporate clients that they've been having for the last 30, 40 years, right? So do you see any kind of investment trends happening in Indonesia that may be focused towards it, or do you not see any such? Where are we right now in that whole opportunity of these two sides working together?
Yeah, so there are three growing areas, at least the way we see it at Microsoft here when it comes to the investment of the collective collaboration between corporations and startups. Number one, I just cannot hide this, it's generative AI. It's our weekly topic with our customers, corporations, startups, governments, educations. It's still on the top spot on what is the best potential for each industries, for many sectors to be able to see what's the real potential of generative AI for them. That's number one. Number two, we at Microsoft continuously looking at SDG as a larger commitment to support the countries where we having presence on. Not different with Indonesia. We are aiming several points within SDG, climate and inclusive economy. So those are where we are still seeing investment will have continuously its inflection points. And number three, I believe many of person of this room can quickly relate is cybersecurity. In the past, cybersecurity probably is your phase 2 or phase 3 of your digital transformation roadmap. I believe it is no longer today. Cybersecurity needs to be in phase 0. And what we call at Microsoft is that any digital innovation, the foundation has to be secure and trust. So cybersecurity is got to be my number 3 in the list.
Okay, so you do see investment trends taking place in deep tech areas rather than, see what happened in the last few years. People were investing in people or ideas or concepts, right? Now they're looking at investing in technologies which will help make business work. Because I think what's happening now, and I've noticed this in the last 1 year, is investments are being made in order to support a P&L, a profit and loss case. Not really for the kind of investment that were done, let's say 10 years ago, which is about habit changing. If you realize how e-commerce investments were done, a lot of money was thrown into e-commerce to change habits. Not necessarily to build the platform or necessarily to build a brand, but change the buying habits of people to go digital. And that's what the largest investment were made by Amazon and some of the largest pioneers. But today we see that the investments are more specific. It's to being how to use technology so that you can build a case around a P&L for your company, a P&L for your customers, a P&L for your service providers, etc. So I think opportunities in tech investment becomes important. What are the opportunities? Let's say going forward from now, where do we see opportunities for companies to, or people to make investments in technology, or for companies to receive investment, because now the market is transitioning? Would you like to comment on this, Martin? Maybe some trends that you have noticed and some opportunities in Indonesia that you've seen? Because you're a finance guy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I've never fully understood the B2C model here, because often there's no product market fit before the money's being spent. So if there's going to be a correction in the market here, it has to go as in a B2B. As in, again, it's very hard because, as I say, I often try to talk to owners of companies here, and it's early stages, so people, I understand the reason the venture capitalists do not invest in B2B and B2G is because it's extremely difficult to convince people who've never done something before to suddenly use your software. So, most VCs particularly want to push up the value quickly in the first few years by number of users. Well, if you're building software, you can't do it. However, where's the value? Of course, if you look around the world, even Amazon, they started off doing e-commerce, but e-commerce is quite hard to make money. So they've now moved into other areas, It's like this super app idea. Everyone's obsessed by doing a super app. They don't work. You're competing on too many fronts. So I think all this big is best is just needs to stop. The problem is there's been too much money in the hands of people where they're raising bigger and bigger funds. So actually, I think the biggest issue is too much money. A lot of these startups would have made money by now, would have been profitable by now. But the biggest issue was they were encouraged to keep growing and growing and growing without any idea what was going to happen later. And yeah, this is the major issue you have now, that basically they've built all these companies and then they worry 10 years later, are we ever going to make money? So if you focus on not being the biggest necessarily straight away, on getting the product market fit, on profitability, and then taking funding maybe, once you're already there, I think obviously that's going to be far more sustainable. But there's going to be far less players, because there's too many players now. Everyone who went to Jakarta International School now seems to think they're going to be a VC or a founder. That's not possible. Everyone can't be a professional footballer. Everyone cannot be a film star. It's just not happening. So the problem is, if you've got a total oversupply of people in an area and it's non-meritocratic, I believe you're going to have an issue. So I think there needs to be a wider spread of resources amongst a wider group of people. And I think we need to move towards less money in the early stages. And once you've actually established your success, then start raising money. But when I hear about companies who've raised $100 million and lost $20 million and have $5,000 revenue, it blows my mind. And this is, from a finance background, it makes no sense. So I think that's the case.
So you make a good point, actually. Do we have any show of hands of any investors in the room? Are there any VCs or angel investors in the room? Okay, 1, 2. Okay, we would love to have some conversation with you during the Q&A, right? Which comes up in a few minutes. Yeah, so but Danny, actually, I wanted to ask you, just to take off on what Martin just said, do you see an opportunity for tech companies themselves to be investors going on now? Rather than the money always coming from VCs and angels?
Yeah, it's a big potential. And nowadays, I think because of the difficulty of raising funds and also the tech winter, now every startup must go back into the basic again and fundamental business, raising money from the Series F fund. I mean, father, family, friends. Yeah. So because if you ask like a VC to chip in on you, and then a lot of terms, all the CL kind of things, that means you need to sell yourself for the probably next 5 or 10 years. And I like to add what Martin said, that I like to raise my concern about how the investment going in Indonesia. I'm not talking about where the investment have to be looked at in which area, like AI, etc., nothing. Yeah. But let me ask you something. Have you invested in any kind of like R&D startup? None. Oh, only you. Yeah, that's why I really appreciate Martin for investing in R&D, because Indonesia is mainly seen as a market.
Yeah.
Driven by demand, by the market demand, by the consumption. So if you like to be sustainable, so you need to build an R&D in Indonesia. Look at how many the big tech companies in Indonesia built their own R&D office or R&D facility in Indonesia. Google, Microsoft, and maybe others. Do we have any R&D from the big tech companies in here? Do we have any? So this guy has the gut to build his own R&D. So this is really appreciated. And that's why the big missing link in Indonesia, the startup ecosystem and tech companies in Indonesia, is the R&D. Thank you.
Very good point made, actually. So when we talk about opportunities in tech investment, we are no longer just looking at investing in companies and ideas and people. We are looking at the second layer and the third layer. And I think this is where the larger corporations and companies come into play, because they do have money to invest as long as it's invested in something that is helping the longevity of the business model. So I think there are 2 other topics I'd like to cover before we get into the Q&A. Government support for tech investments. Now, this is something contentious, because the role of government, traditionally, that has contributed to the growth of digital economy, is to not be involved. The lesser government involvement, the more easier for the sector to grow, which is not necessarily a good thing because the government role does put on the brakes, puts on regulation, puts on making sure there's fair play, and also a certain amount of oversight, which may be necessary in a lot of new technologies available. But however, that's a delicate balance. What kind of support should government really do? Now, going forward, what would be the kind of, like OJK plays a role and several of the other institutions play a role. So any quick views on that? What kind of government support to tech investment would be wanted or should be expected?
Right, very quickly, because the screen's broken here.
Yeah.
But I see Miranda with a 3 minute, 1 minute.
1 minute,
It
yeah.
might be 2 minutes, just hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're a PTPMA. We do deep tech, so there's no local companies doing the same. We do our own R&D. I would like more support. I feel still as a foreigner, I have some blockaging when I'm creating over 100 jobs here and I'm doing multiple other things. So I think for our kind of technology, which can actually be the first Indonesian technology exported overseas, we should get some more support. Just because we're foreigners, I mean, at the end of the day, there's only 2 foreigners, 150 people, right? So I would like more support. But the trouble is, again, the money in the past, the big VC, government-owned VC, has all gone to the big unicorns, right? It hasn't gone to R&D in Indonesia, because no one's done R&D in Indonesia till a foreigner came along and did it. And that's the reality. Yeah. It hasn't happened.
So we need to look at a different approach and probably lobby the government to look at how they invest or support in a different way. I'm going to move into the QA now. Do we have 5 minutes for the Q&A? Yeah, okay. So, this last point, which is investor perspectives and strategies. And I did notice there are 2 hands up in the room, 2 or 3 hands that came up from people who are investing. Would you like some of the questions to the panelists to be related to about investor strategies, or do you have any other free question? Please feel free. Can I ask? Yes, please. The mic here. I think we would have time for about 2 questions, maybe 3, as long as the answers are very quick. Please introduce yourself and also who you would like to direct the question to.
My name is Min. I work with Martin.
Yeah.
I'm the Chief Executive of BVT.
Sure.
I'd like to ask a question to Vicky.
Yes.
So AI has been around for at least 3 decades, right? And currently, at least in the current, the 2-3 years, AI became more popular because of processing power and cheap data storage. Those are the 2 limiting factors in the past. There are many good things about it, obviously, but what it is that we are doing from a Microsoft perspective or country perspective in conjunction with data privacy in data modeling, training, and development of programs around making sure that technology is done and used properly. AI is nothing new. AI has been around, like I say, for at least 3 decades. Many engineering firms been using it for a long time. So what is the roadmap from Microsoft perspective? What are you guys doing for training, skill set, developing awareness, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, thanks for the questions. Number 1, when it comes to the roadmap, this is a very common questions around how we as a tech company making sure that AI should be used for good and continuously used for good. While we are fully aware that there are potential uses of AI for bad or not good, but the roadmap is for Microsoft here is to build what we call with a responsible AI. Responsible AI is not a term, it's not a brand. It's a specific engineering division within Microsoft Tech, and the goal is to promote and ensure the use of AI for good. I'll give you one example. One of the pillars on Microsoft Responsible AI is privacy and security. We are in the situation where data privacy issue is heightened, and we are building the capability in the era of generative AI, like Azure OpenAI, where you can access ChatGPT, and there are concerns around whether OpenAI will get smarter with your data, and then your competitors will use it. While I'm saying that this is the era where all industries can reinvent their competitive advantage, how we at Microsoft actually ensures we are protecting not just privacy and security, but also your domain knowledge, which is your competitive advantage. And that is where responsible AI comes in. So that's number one. Number two, on talent development, we actually see the deep root on the challenges in the country. Again, having spent 28 years in the country, where digital skills divide is still a gap. But what is very encouraging is now government talking to us continuously. Even when Sam Altman, probably some of you have the chance to meet Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, comes to Indonesia. The discussion that we're having firstly is with Ministry of Education. Probably you are on the room back then or seeing the live stream event where Pak Nadiem is actually asking the questions on how this technology will actually bring good to educations and for the digital skills in the country on a larger picture. So those are the continuous discussions, and we are very pleased to see the government now are seeing more the good side to it rather than facing away from it, in the sense that bringing generative AI to educations yield more benefits rather than the other side. So those are the points that we're looking at. And again, responsible AI is something we commit to develop in the long term.
Okay, thank you. So one more question we have for time for, and could we please have it related to investment technology, the topic of the session? Anybody here has a question? Okay, maybe I can ask this to the panel here. From an investor perspective, what have you been experiencing when your discussion happens with the various kind of investors you're talking to now? A quick round of what have been the issues that investors are talking about?
Yeah, again, I mean, I probably don't talk to the normal investor, like the VCs at all. But yeah, from the people I know, and since day one, the people who've invested with me in this project, who are basically investment bankers, they've always been looking at that sustainability, actually. And I don't think that's changed. I think that everyone else has caught up to it now. I think people are realizing that you can't just run a business with endless cash.
Okay. But Danny?
Yeah, so in my experience, I only bootstrapping, and also I have exited one of my companies, and I gain a lot of money from it. But in terms of like talking to investors, that we need to have a very good understanding for both sides. Yeah, not only just making the startup as a cash cow to make a really good and fast return, but also to have a really good connection and asking for the right partnership with the investor to open the access, to open the market, to build the market as well with the investors.
Okay, thank you. So, Pak Vicky, you being in Microsoft and working with so many people, what's been the mood of the investors today? What have you observed?
There are shifts to be more focused on ESG, as what Martin said. Even our most larger corporate clients are looking into building their capability across scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Even FSIs, right? So that's number one. Again, number two, I would say in every investment discussions, at least to Microsoft, cybersecurity is never going away. So the questions around how to protect data, privacy, right? So we are in the position to continuously advise our clients, our corporate VCs, partners, to continuously looking at that particular points.
So we do have a separate panel on the role of AI in business. I'm sure we can take this up a little more in detail then. So I think that we have just about enough time to close this session. Thank you very much. Could we give a warm round of applause for our panelists? And I think there's a small token of appreciation for all of them. Thank you. And if you can have a group photograph? Yes. Do we have the photographer here? If you could please come to the front. Yeah. Okay. If you can just get a little closer. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm handing this over back to Chris, our very competent MC for the day. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much indeed, Sachin, for wonderfully moderating that first session. Ladies and gentlemen, please do take the opportunity of a comfort break, 2 or 3 minutes. Grab yourselves a tea, coffee, pancake, whatever it is you fancy. But back to your table in 2 or 3 minutes, please. We'll continue with the second panel shortly. We are ready to move on with our second panel. Our second panel is Indonesia's digital roadmap. Where are we now and where are we going? This panel will be moderated by Ian Betts. A little bit of an introduction to Ian. He's the managing partner currently of Castle Asia. He has an exceptional record in risk management, political and country risk analytics, with more than 30 years experience here in Southeast Asia. He's also the Honorary Secretary of the British Chamber of Commerce and leads the Technology and Digitalization Hub for the Chamber as well. I'll leave Ian to introduce his expert panelists. Ian Betts.
Thank you very much, Chris, Martin, Min, and team at Bumi Vata. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to be with you here this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be with you talking about these themes this morning. We've had a great first session where we really explored the relationship between startups, corporations, and the government. We looked at human capital and meritocracy with Martin. We've talked about investment. We've talked about build or buy, and we've talked about profit and loss in what is still a very early industry. Right now, we're going to build on that by looking at, as Chris said, the digital roadmap for Indonesia, specifically in digital infrastructure. And I'm very pleased to be joined by our 3 panelists for this session. We have Mr. Anton Setiawan, President Commissioner of Tricor Indonesia. Anton, are you with us? Please, if you'd like to come up. Round of applause for Anton, please. And we have Tony Supriyadi, Head of Pricing and Data Analytics at Maybank Indonesia. Pak Tony, silakan. Terima kasih. Here we go. And my friend Alvin Christian, Regional Director and Head of Delivery for APAC at TMF. Alvin, please. Bring your coffee with you, Alvin, that's the way. Thank you. Well, we had a great first session and we've kicked off with some really excellent themes. And I'd like to keep it going with a very fast-moving panel on Indonesia's digital roadmap. Where are we now and where are we going? We've had an introduction in the first panel where we really explored the ecosystem for these industries. And gentlemen, the industries that you represent are core to this. You're in services, service provision and delivery. You're in finance. So this is where the rubber hits the road. We've talked about corporations. We've talked about the challenges of investment for startups, and also the nature of profit and loss in this industry. But before we can really build an ecosystem, we have to have an infrastructure. We have to have the materials, the concrete, the bricks and mortar of a digital infrastructure. The theme of this session is where are we now with regard to that, and where are we going? So perhaps I could start off by asking you all, how do you assess, how you evaluate the current state of the digital infrastructure in Indonesia. But Alvin, if I could start with you, please. You're in service delivery for a great many companies in APAC and Indonesia with branches across the region. How are you seeing Indonesia's digital infrastructure now?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Real pleasure to see you all. From the perspective of digital infrastructure, it is an exciting time, I feel, for Indonesia. At our company, TMF Group, we provide advisory and actually professional services assistance to a lot of companies across different sectors. But what we're seeing in the last 2-3 years, particularly in the technology sector, and a subset of that, little data center, maybe as I have covered prior with you, Ian, we're seeing a lot of movement, a lot of activities, a lot of excitement, and definitely a subset of sector that is critical, right, and really underpin the growth of digital infrastructure in Indonesia. Right now, in the data center space, I believe around 70 data centers operating in Indonesia. They're all mainly regional. I don't know, we have data center people here in the room, but they're all, or a large number of them are regional or local based companies. And through the business that we are operating, managing in Indonesia, I can see some of the real big data center players globally coming into the market and will change the landscape of the data center market in Indonesia, right? Which will turn into maybe some of the data centers combining, right? Some consolidation to take place to be competitive, and for them to then push forward with even better technology, better solutions for their customers, right? Which will only mean good things for us and everyone, whether it's in the medium and large scale businesses and operations, as well as in the micro and small size business. So maybe I'll open up with that.
Thank you very much, Alvin, for that. You mentioned data centers, and data centers are, of course, the core of any digital infrastructure for any country. Great deal of growth there and interest in Indonesia in expanding the data center geography across the country. We're seeing a great deal of industrialization and digitalization in areas such as Karawang and other parts of West Java and provinces.
That's correct.
And we'll come back and talk about that. But perhaps, Pak Soni, from the perspective of Maybank, how are you seeing digital infrastructure from a finance and banking perspective? You will have data centers and access to them. You'll be relying on them. How is digital infrastructure from the banking perspective?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ian. That's a very, very good question, actually. From perspective of the Maybank, of course, there's two questions here. Number one is, should we go digital? Number two, should we provide ourselves with our own data center? This is the questions that raised by the top management in Maybank. And then the first question is easy to answer that. Yes, we need to go digital anyway. We have mobile banking. That's one of the apps that people can see immediately. They interact with us. The second question is, with what happened so far, should we trust public data center, for example, or cloud, for this instance? And then should we build our own private cloud? And this is the challenge that faced by the bank so far. And to answer that question, it's not merely looking at the stage of a simple aspect of security alone, but looking at how, if we want to build our own private cloud, what kind of stages that we need to provide, number one. Number two, in terms of digital maturity, are we ready for that from technical aspect point of view? Bear in mind that in our situation, we don't even have any security guys that looking at the certification, national certification point of view. For public cloud, they have the ISO 27001. We don't have that. So to get that perspective, looking at the security point of view itself, is massive. Yes, we have CISO, the chief looking at the security point of view. And then we have IT guy that focusing on security. But when we looking at this issue with the cases so far, most of them are coming from phishing, coming from email, for example. So this is the homework for us in Maybank that we are currently looking at. We are proposing a few options, looking at the private cloud, looking at the public cloud, maybe hybrid, so that kind of things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Soni. You bring up actually a vital point here, and not just for banking. It's not just about the physical digital infrastructure, it's also about the regulatory environment. And banking in particular will be vulnerable to a changing and evolving regulatory environment that is also, just as this industry, at the very starting edge. So policy and regulations may be behind the curve. In fact, you may be pushing that envelope. So additional challenges.
Absolutely, yeah. When we're talking about regulation here, the Indonesian government just started with what they call as a Data Protection Act, like in the UK. In the UK, I was living in the UK for 20 years. So it was introduced in 2015, Data Protection Act, and then 2018 with GDPR. And we sort of like Indonesia, we want to try to copy that as our platform of law. The question is, I was invited to speak in front of the lawyers association when we're talking about this. And I said that, number one, to set up a regulations related with the Data Protection Act is easier. The difficulty is that changing the culture. At this stage, if you want to get into the building in Jakarta, any large building, you need to provide your KTP, which is your ID, basically. And that alone, you can ask for loans with your ID. And this, my friend, is one of the... second one is that, another thing, I'm not saying that this is bad or good. Indonesian is very nice people. We talk, socializing, and then sometimes things like, do you know what? That is his second wife coming in. Do you know that? Yeah, that's number one. Number two, do you know that Indonesia is very nice? Again, I mentioned about this earlier. We talk about how we can talk anything, but when it comes to money, my friend, this is mine. I'm not going to show it to her. No, no way. This is the power of mobile banking. When it comes to money, I'm on my own. I don't want to show it to you. My wife, you can see the other account, not this account. That in itself is, and I mentioned about the culture, about the security, about what happens if someone's paying, if my wife paying something in Soko or whatever, I can see that immediately. But if my wife, my daughters sending that, I can see that. But on the other hand, if the vendors or merchant that they are buying from is not secure, can easily tap into the security number, that's it, all gone.
Thank you very much, Pak Soni. You've highlighted again some important points here for the digital infrastructure. But Anton, I'd like to come across to you. We've talked about some of the basics here, and in the limited time we have, we can't go into too much detail, but perhaps you could explain to us how in Tricor you're recognizing opportunities for digitalization, entry into a digital infrastructure, opportunities and challenges for the digital transformation that you're seeing from your perspective in providing services to your clientele.
Thanks, Ian, Martin, and Min for having me today. From my point of view, servicing quite a big, large client in tech as well as companies across businesses, I've seen the businesses start to transform on how actually they try to simplify on the processes. They would like to see how the businesses can improve by using the digital processes and as well as actually how actually they can basically improve their P&L. I've seen a lot of things happening from the big companies. They shared to me they're quite optimistic on how actually the technology has improved in Indonesia and how all this digital transformation has actually basically bring added value to the company. But also they find struggles on how actually to basically Indonesia need to improve on how actually we try to cater the function of those digital into every single division on every businesses. It's not really quite impactful at the moment, but we believe actually we are growing and going into the right direction. But still, once again, in fact, actually the businesses still find difficulties and on how actually to basically manage and then try to implement the purpose of the digital transformation on every single line of their businesses.
Is this a mindset issue or is it a digital infrastructure issue, would you say?
The government, if we flashback to what President Joko Widodo has said back in 2019, when he started to initiate the Indonesia 4.0, we've seen actually the optimism and the government understanding on how actually to support the national economy. Myself, being given the exposure to live in Australia for more than 20 years, I have a full understanding on how actually the technology has actually become the main support on big countries' economy. And then actually, I believe actually one day Indonesia will going through the same process. But once again, the process will not be easy. The government support on infrastructure is really needed, not only on the infrastructure, but on the society, on the economic, where actually it will contribute into the whole result of the digital transformation itself.
Well, thanks very much, Pak Anton. You've hit on a couple of issues here, and I think one of them is education, both in schools, universities, and other educational institutions, as well as in terms of educating human capital and bringing it into the digital industries in order that that can filter into business and grow the elements that you require to provide those services. I'd like to turn this back to Alvin, if I could. How are you seeing, we've talked about the government a little bit, are you seeing any initiatives and policies from the government that are promoting digitalization that give you optimism here? We've talked about President Joko Widodo's comments and prompts and encouragement. How are you seeing this?
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot of positive things taking place around this. I think there are a couple of programs that I know are driven by the government. I think one is the Indonesian Digital Roadmap, which I think starting in 2021 to 2024. There is also this Go Digital MSMEs or UMKM Go Digital program. They're largely similar in terms of trying to create a framework, right, that will allow value add and economic growth to MSMEs and get them into then the next stage of their growth, right? If it's micro, then become small. If small, become medium. If medium, become large, right? Through digital solution, digital innovation underpinned by those basic things, right? In terms of innovation, digital connectivity, right, and transformation, right? As Sonny mentioned. So yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement around that in terms of the government program itself. I think on the other side, on the education side, also I'm seeing some active initiatives or work being done by the government. I think because I think we need to be mindful that it's not just the incoming, not just the MSME starting up, but also the existing ones that are out there, and also the existing workers, right? Myself included, and maybe some of us, right? I think some of us had the benefit, I think UK, Australia, US, so we had the benefit of living elsewhere, but even then, with the progress in technology and the innovation that kept on coming up, I think we covered chat AI earlier, we have to constantly inventing, reinventing, or developing and getting familiar with this. And I think there's a government program with the pre-work card, which I think cover that element of improving the understanding on information technology, digitalization, which I think will go a long way for incoming, also assisting workers.
Well, thanks very much, Alvin, for identifying some of those features that the government is actually working on. I was at an event this week with the governor of West Java, Ridwan Kamil. It was organized by the Blue Ocean Strategy, and the sponsor for that was Sampurna University. We have Marshall over there. Excellent event. And during that event, we talked about the digital infrastructure and how the COVID pandemic had, in fact, forced an evolution in digitalization in the country, with Peduli Lindungi and all of the other digital transformative apps and services that were provided through that.
Yeah.
Perhaps we're talking here about the digital roadmap and where are we now. We've talked about where we're coming from in terms of the digital infrastructure. In the few minutes we have left, let's talk a little bit about where we're going. Perhaps, Sonny, perhaps I can turn over to you. Where do you see future prospects for digitalization in Indonesia, perhaps in your industry, based on the brief comments that we've heard from the room?
From bank's point of view, Maybank especially here, as we know, the economy in Indonesia is quite resilient. When we talking about we endure the pandemic, if you're looking at the stages how we get into that, is one of the component as a backbone of our economy is SMEs. 60% of the economy here is supported by SMEs. So if we don't have that, it must be very, very fragile. But luckily we have the SMEs there. So the question is, if we believe that the economy is supported by this SME, and we're talking about digital going forward, how can we embrace them? How can we provide support to this business, and how we increase the population of bankable population in Indonesia? So that is the main point that we are trying to look at from bank's perspective. When we did analysis on addressable market, for example, it's massive. And then when we're looking at what actually Maybank share for that, okay, it's quite small in there because we don't want to go into that low. There's a BRI in there. We don't want to go too high. There's a foreign bank in there. We're sort of like attacking the middle bit, which is the community related. And also we want to focus on the SME. That's the priority for 2023 and 2024. So we are trying to look at where are they, these SMEs? And then with the geospatial technology, it's now easier to locate them. And then we want to utilize that, and then we pinpoint what actually can be done with these people and with these companies, with these businesses, and how can we reach them utilizing digital. So that is the point from my bank point of view. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. You've really hit on something there which I think is crucial to Indonesia's digitalization and infrastructure, and that is the SME market. I think that's something Martin and Bumi Vata recognized very early on, that geospatial technology and software can address that market. I'd like to ask Pak Anton, how are you seeing the future prospects for the digital infrastructure? We've talked a little bit about the challenges in your earlier comments that you were seeing. What are your hopes and expectations for the future prospects of the digital infrastructure, and particularly with regard to the use of geospatial software, if you have any application for that?
This is a good question. Let me just remind on what is really happening again in Indonesia. If every one of us looking back like a decade ago at least, how actually we see Indonesia as a big country, but also quite left behind. But we actually see the opportunity that actually Indonesia, a big country with a big market, and then we are basically in the level of generation evolution. Seeing what the cabinet and President Joko Widodo has actually implemented, we see actually the optimism. That's the first thing. If we look at what really happening with the digital business, It's inevitable, basically. So basically, every businesses must not only comply, but really step into it and really use the technology to be part of the businesses. Otherwise, eventually the businesses will left behind. When it comes to, this is Indonesia, most of the businesses, we always see Indonesia as what Martin have said, white labeling business. So we only see the opportunity from one business without seeing the deep information and the understanding on how to develop, let's say, the software business like Lokasi or BVT. So there is always an occasion where actually clients will come back and then companies coming to Indonesia selling the businesses and end up actually they fail actually to deliver what it meant to for the clients. Well, this is exactly what actually the government, I spoke with a couple of government officials, people from BKPMs, the directors and the government officials, the members of Kadin. They're always coming back to us actually, look, this is what happened with our landscape, Indonesia business landscape, where actually a lot of businesses coming in with a lot of optimism, but lack of understanding. So basically having BVT actually to come on board, not as a white label company, but really do the R&D, having a good deep understanding about how to redevelop a product. It's become a really solid optimism for us in Indonesia to see there is a company like BVT actually wanted actually to not only selling for profit, but getting a really deep understanding on how actually solve the Indonesia economic problem to support the businesses in the same time.
Well, thank you very much for that, Pak Anton. And also, I mean, I recognize the pioneering nature of this industry and what Bumivatra has brought to it. Perhaps we could pass the mic to Pak Alvin, and also the same question for you. We've talked about where we've come from in terms of the digital infrastructure, very early build in Indonesia, the disadvantages and challenges that Pak Anton's highlighted. We've heard about some of the aspirational hopes that Pak Soni has highlighted too. I mentioned Karawang, and I think you were going to say something about that. So this is your chance to build on where you see the future for the digital infrastructure and your service delivery.
No, I think it's going to be very important and instrumental, right, in the journey of Indonesia and to realize Indonesia for all, Vision 2045, you know, all those things. So I think feel very, very bullish about digital sector of our economy to become a bigger part contributing to the economy, and not only in and of itself, but also as a wider, having a wider impact to the rest of the real sectors in particular, as well as financial sectors, contributing and growing the economy. And then about the Karawang, did you mention?
Karawang and West Java and digitalization.
That's correct. Yes, obviously that's where some of these data centers are now being built. I think some of them are already up and running, operating. We have a couple of our clients actually that are in the stage of completion. They're multinational, global, maybe the largest player in the space, which just again signaling the optimism and also the appetite of large multinational global players in the technology sector to see, identify, and invest in Indonesia.
Well, thanks very much, Pak Alvin. And I think, you know, some of the comments you make really emphasize how the digital infrastructure has to meet the physical infrastructure. And now we're seeing across the country railways, light railways, undergrounds, etc., now helping to bring the physical infrastructure to these industries and helping the digital infrastructure move on. So perhaps we could open the floor to questions. If we have any questions from the floor, we've got time for a couple, if we have, on digital infrastructure. Where are we now? Where have we come from? Where are we going? This is your opportunity. Do we have any questions? Yes, sir. If you would like to let us know where you're from and what you represent and your question and to whom you'd like to put it.
Hi, I'm Kevin, Head of Solutions from BVT. And the question is for the panel. In the previous panel discussion, it was mentioned that there is a lack of R&D startup and facility in Indonesia, and that's the missing link. So in terms of digital roadmap, where are we in terms of enabling and accelerating the development of R&D startup and
Very
facilities?
good question, Kevin. Thanks very much for that. It's actually on my list, but I didn't have a chance to get to it, so thanks for allowing me to come back to it. Let's start with Pak Alvin. R&D and innovation. Where are we? Where are you as a company? We've seen how Bumi Vata have invested in R&D, and maybe few others actually have. But is that something for you, and where are you seeing that?
No, absolutely. It's a critical part, actually, within, let's say, in the company that I'm part of, right, within TMF Group, because of the journey that we have taken. We operate in 85 countries now, with I think, close to 150 offices throughout the world. And we've done that in a short period of time. We recognize at this stage that to be able for us to continue our growth journey, to sustain and the growth that we've had built the last few years, the answer is to be more focused on technology, right? To improve upon our delivery. I'm actually one of the byproduct of that. They created a delivery structure, which I'm heading now for the region. And so yeah, everything that you can think of, anything from the adoption of, early on RPA, now OCR, Signals AI, all those things are part of the portfolio of technology, either adoption or experiment or piloting that that we're looking into and investing in seriously right now. So yeah, it's a big part, and we feel that that's one that's going to allow us to get to that next stage of our life cycle as a company.
Thanks very much for the TMF view on that. Perhaps Sonny, Maybank's perspective on R&D, is something you have, perhaps in the region?
Yeah, the focus of our R&D at this stage is looking at the customer-centric CX, basically, customer experience. So when we're looking at the umbrella of everything, because they are financial services, the keywords in the service. So CX is the main theme of everything that we provide. When we're talking about this, which CX are you talking about, Sonny? We divide it into a few layers of our customers. Number one is, we have mass banking, we have privilege, we have premier, and so on and so forth. But if we're talking about digital, do we need to invest for the whole layers or not? Apparently not, because of the top layers of our customers. It's not that they don't know about digital, they do know that, but when I put a lot of money in your bank, Sonny, I think I deserve an assistant. So that kind of mentality, that kind of service, that kind of product that we provide to that layer. Slightly lower down, up to the mass, we're focusing on digital. So this is where the R&D, because we don't provide any assistant, we don't provide any advisors specifically just for you. We have 2 million customers within that area. So when we have that much, we need to go into digital, no questions. So the question further on would be, are we ready infrastructure-wise, and behind it, who are they, these people who's going to be operating all of this machine? Are we ready for that? That's another investment that we provide. Within Maybank, we have a lot of trainings and then scholarship as well, focusing on digitalization. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anton, final word for you on R&D. Is that something for you? Finance, banking, financial inclusion, certainly that's all part of it. But how are you seeing that R&D in your company?
I know time is run up, but let me just wrap it up, perhaps the shortest possible. Kevin, right? I think your question was one of the good questions today. Let me just flashback a little bit. When it comes to product rights coming from VCs, and then why the needs for us to have R&D, it's really important. because I've seen from Tracker Group itself on how actually we develop our program, our software for businesses, for P&L, and to assist a lot of businesses across category. We've seen actually the commitment actually to spend our time on the R&D is really important. We doesn't want to see what has happened in the past where actually people just come on board having technology coming from another company, they just white labels and they sell it, right? Along the line, actually, they have to stop it because the program is not really performing as what they expect that to be. Then we understand that actually it become not only, it become the anxiety for businesses actually to experience that. And then basically for us from Tracker Group, we just want to ensure basically it's not going to happen. The same like BVT, basically R&D is really important and will be the backbone support for our client actually to trust that actually the business can grow continuously.
Thank you very much, Pak Anton. I'd really like to thank you for being with us today, Pak Alvin from TMF, Pak Sony from Maybank Indonesia, and Pak Anton from Tricor Indonesia. We've had a great exploration of the digital infrastructure, where we are now, where we're going, but our session's come to an end, so perhaps Jessica, I could hand over back to Min, and we'd go through our photos. Thank you, Mr. Min Tun. This is from Anton, Tricor Indonesia. Let me get out of the way. Thank you very much. Round of applause for Min and Anton. And for Pak Sony, Maybank Indonesia. Thank you very much, Pak Sony. Alvin from TMF, thank you very much. Thank you all to the panel. We'll just stay for one short photo before we hand back to Chris Wren. Wouldn't be the same without Martin. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed to Ian Betts, the first of his two sessions, wonderfully moderated, extracting some great insights relating to Indonesia's digital roadmap. Where are we now and where are we going? Thank you, panelists. And for his second session, this particular panel focused on the role of AI in business. Sachin, please introduce us to your panelists. We're not going to give you a comfort break this time specifically. Just please grab your tea, your coffee, your snacks as you wish, as you need to. Sachin.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good morning again to all of you. I think you've had two exciting sessions so far. We're going to move on to the third, and we're going to keep it crisp and short. This session is about the role of AI in business. I think this is a topic that's close to heart for a lot of people here in the room. I'd like to invite my panelists to the stage right now. Pa Adiguna Mahendra, the Chief AI Business Strategy of NodeFlux. Please come onto stage. Thank you, Pa. Pa Kevin Dial Destoro, Head of Solution and Architect of Bhumi Varta Technology. Pa Kevin, yes, thank you. And Pa Vijay Sarashetty, co-founder, Arogya AI and Director Technology, Starbucks Global. Please, have you on stage. Okay, we'll get started right away. I think the important point of AI in business should be rooted in an understanding of what exactly are we talking about in AI. I don't think there's anybody in this room who has not experienced AI in some form or the other. When you open your phones, you open Google, you open any app, you open a website, you open e-commerce, Tokopedia, AI is at work. It's a layer that's happening behind the scenes, trying to give you better solution, better options, etc., and is the core part of all business solutions today. But if you look at AI, what is it actually AI really doing? So it starts actually with mimicking human intelligence. So let's talk about human intelligence. Human intelligence can learn, it can process data and take a decision, right? And it has a lot of objectivity and subjectivity. Now, the human mind gets tired, is sometimes moody, sometimes you didn't have a good day, you're unwell, or you're very happy, and you can't work 24/7. Therefore, you want to outsource the human capacity to take decisions to artificial intelligence. That's a very, very basic description of what AI is actually doing for you. However, what AI does is, it does it at super speed, and it can work at much faster speeds, and it tries to lower human error as much as possible because it doesn't get tired. It can work 24/7. So this is the essential basis of AI at work for your business. And the jobs that you should be replacing in your business are where AI can do a better job than a human intelligence. So this factor is important. You must understand that AI is to be used so that it can do a better job than human intelligence. You should not be looking at applications of AI which is taking away the human factor. Okay? So with that background in mind, I'd like to go directly into this discussion. The question I'd like to have with the panel here is, what do you think are the upcoming applications, the new applications? Let's not talk about what's already there. I think everybody here already knows that. What's coming up? What's next in AI applications in all the various sectors? From your own experience. Maybe a quick one from all of you. We'll start with Pa Adi Guna first.
Okay, thank you, Pak Sachin. I think we are undergoing the significant revolution in AI right now. And when you said something about, okay, AI will try to replicate how the human mind works, I think we are going to that direction. So we are going to what we call the artificial general intelligence. And this is make it possible with the applications of multimodal AI as we see now, and it's enabled by the large language models. And we see some of the application of that. Of course, some of our panelists have been talking about that, which is ChatGPT, right? And this is just the beginning, I think. We are going to much more interesting applications of AI in the future and using this multimodal AI.
Okay. Pa Kevin, maybe something that GVT is doing? What are the upcoming applications of AI that you see happening? No, not ChatGPT. Maybe what you are doing in GVT, in your organization. BVTs in your organization.
Hello?
Okay. What is BVT doing?
Yes.
Especially?
First of all, when talking about AI, I think it's useful to think in terms of business capability, right? Traditionally, it's all about automation, and then next about making prediction using machine learning. And now we are in a new era using ChatGPT, DALL-E to generate content. And in terms of generative AI, I think the next exciting thing would be not only generating text or images, but also generating products. At BVT, we are still at the moment focusing on the prediction side. So given a store or a branch, what would be the best product to sell in that location? But I think going forward, it would be very interesting to use generative AI technology to recommend a novel product.
Okay. So, Pa Vijay, at Arogya AI, are you looking at some new areas of application?
Well, business is, this particular panel is about business and how AI is going to be used in business, right? So there are many definitions of business, but one of the most important definitions of business is making decisions in the right time, in the right amount of time. Not just the right time, but the right amount of time, correct? So AI helps augment that decision making. So most of the business, and now AI can be for entertainment, AI can be for so many things, right? The next generation of applications, nobody knows where it is headed. But if it is pertinent to business, it is all about decision making. So at Arogya, we are actually developing, and research and development, we developed the entire product here in Indonesia. and helps decision makers to make decisions, whether I'm overstock, whether I'm understock, and whether I'm at an optimal quantity, should I be buying the stuff, and all of that. So humans can do it, of course. Humans can do it, but when it comes to 10,000 SKUs, 12,000 SKUs, and that decision has to be in real time, that's where AI comes in. So AI is going to mature in itself in how fast it can bring those decisions to life, and how quickly can it present to the person who is asking the question. And sorry, it's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but the most important thing about artificial intelligence, and which business should understand, is it has to take an absolute top-down approach. Asking those questions, what can help me? Forget AI, forget anything, forget technology, forget data stacks and everything. What can help me? What is the question that I can ask, and what is the question that I need answers for? That is where AI starts. And I think many businesses have started doing that.
Good point. This actually makes it very relevant to the businesses in the room here. You should all be considering about how AI can automate some of the things that you already do, so that you can focus on other things. I'm a strong believer that AI actually is a productivity tool. And the using of AI in your business allows your business to think of other things that you've not been having time to do so, because AI has taken over certain very basic functions. So my next question is actually to this, the impact on job roles. I don't mean jobs being replaced or now people don't have jobs, but there is an impact on your job being changed, because now you have tools like AI to help what you do. So what's your view on that? How has AI impacted jobs, or how will it continue to impact jobs as we go forward? We can go in the same order, maybe with Pa Adiguna first.
Okay, so my take on this, right now, yes, it is impacting some jobs. Let me give you some, example. This is a real-world example from my side. Before, we have juniors engineers, right, which helps us with fixing bugs and everything. But with the technology like GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT, even we can reduce the numbers of the junior developers, right? Not that we are going to lay off a lot of developers, no, but the numbers are reduced. But the functions are changed. For example, before we need a developer who understands only the coding part. Right now, we need to extend their skills, not only the coding part, but like Pa Vijay has already said, doing some more thorough business analysis so that we can have more augmented or automated decision. So it's not that we are going to replace all the developers with AI. I don't think that's going to happen in the next, 5-10 years. After that, I don't know. But right now, what we are doing is that we are extend the capability of developers, not only on the coding part, because it's not necessary anymore right now. I mean, all the syntax and everything is not necessary, because AI can help you with that. But more into the seeing the business problems and how to solve the problems.
Yeah. So, Pa Kevin, have you seen in BVT any change in impact on job roles within your own company? Let's say in the last 1 year?
Yes, certainly with the introduction of ChatGPT, people are more lazy now to write original emails. They just go to ChatGPT and write the prompt. So that's actually a nice change not in terms of job role per se, but in terms of the focus of the activity. So people can now concentrate more on the management part or interfacing with stakeholders and more on the creative side of things.
So it is interesting to see that there is an impact right away. Huh? Certain tools like ChatGPT has made an impact in simple, small things. But going forward, as more and more applications come, we'll see that human intelligence can focus on the bigger things and the bigger issues, while the manual labor part of it gets taken over by AI. How do you see that? Do you agree with all of this, Vijay?
Okay. All right. First and foremost, let me start by saying this. AI is not easy. The AI, and also let me warn you guys, AI is not ChatGPT. ChatGPT is not the end of AI. ChatGPT is just one small thing that is happening. Artificial intelligence is difficult. For business to adopt and adapt to AI is a very long-term solution. And if you're going to ask me about job roles, Well, 100 or 200 years ago when cars came in, everybody was asking, what would happen to horse and carriages. Then came trains, then came this, then came that. All of them coexist. Humans are very adaptable creatures. We will all adapt to it. But the one thing that is for sure, and I think every business has this at the back of their mind, is the fear psychosis that machines will take over, machines will do this, they won't need us. Middle management is worried, management is worried, top management is worried, what am I going to do? Should I or shouldn't I? And what's the gross effect and what's the net effect of all of this? The gross effect on a country and the net effect within my business. How much am I going to make? How much better is it going to happen? So there are some social responsibilities, and I think the CEOs of businesses, the governments of many countries are responsible. More than responsible AI, I am looking for more and more responsible people, right? AI by itself is responsible. It's the people who are responsible. That's how I put it. But there is absolutely no need to have a clash of opinions whether jobs will go away, whether jobs will stay. And as Kevin mentioned, yes, it makes life easier. It makes much better. And then all of a sudden, as a joke, right? I'm just going to that. I used to receive emails from this guy, and they were like, I couldn't read them. It's bad, right? Everything was bad. The content was bad. The context was bad. The language was bad. And all of a sudden, I did not even know about ChatGPT. I'm an AI guy, right to the core. I did not know about ChatGPT. Suddenly, his emails started becoming, oh my God, now I have to read this guy's email. So interesting. And then I found out that he was using ChatGPT. So suddenly even the dumbest of dumbest people can become very smart, right?
A very good point. But you opened this topic about responsible AI and ethical considerations are there. So you remember that where every time you see a DC Comics magazine, movie, or there is this supervillain, and the supervillain will change the world and take over the world using whatever technology they have. And in many ways, AI has been painted to be this villain because AI can do things which sometimes may not be acceptable to humans or human behavior or human social considerations. So this question about responsible AI, ethical use of AI, etc., has been in the news for the longest of time, right? This is the fear factor of AI that people have been using to say that can AI really do the right thing? Does an AI take a decision differently from a human? What are the other, errors in human judgment may sometimes be necessary. And these are all the questions that come up. And I think it's an important one to address because there is no technology in the world that has not faced this. When motor vehicles were brought up, they had the same questions. Are motor vehicles going to kill everybody on the roads? Are stagecoaches, trams and buses and trains going to kill everybody on the roads? So the human endeavor to develop AI technology has always been to take care of such kind of erroneous behaviors of the technology. So we are no different. AI is exactly facing the same kind of challenges, which is why regulation is there, self-regulation by companies is there, and there's a kind of a check and balance being built by the industry to make sure that there is no wild card in this AI game that we are all getting into. But asking this specifically to our panelists, what has been their experience, especially in the implementation of whatever they're doing, the application they're doing in AI? Could you share a little bit about your own personal view on this? Maybe we'll go reverse, Vijay first and come back this way.
Okay, so it's a very, very interesting question, and let's start by talking about this, right? The first and foremost doubt that comes to mind is AI capable of doing stuff? AI is not capable of doing anything at all. You ask it a question, it will answer. Now, what's the power of AI is the amount of data that it can consume, the accuracy with which it can predict or give back an answer, and how fast it can give it. So now for a person who is going to war, and I'm just going to be very general about it. For a person who wants to go to war with another country, he has his generals, his air commodores, his this, that, and all of those people, right? But to get an entire strategy out of them would take him almost 6 months to an year or or 6 weeks, depending upon the situation and the speed at which he has to react. And then he can react. And then he also wants to know what will be the global impact and what country will be against me, for me, and so on and so forth. Now, instead of 6 months, what if I can get this answer within 6 seconds? And also telling the leader of that particular country that go to war, nothing's going to happen. I'll give you 3 options, the worst option, the middle option, and the best option, right? And if he gets all of this, he will go to war. So whose problem was that? Was it the AI's problem or was it the general's problem, right? So that's where the distinction comes in. And now, what has happened is transformers, which is the part of GPT, before they were all algorithms, training, this, and the transformer technology, the worst thing that has happened is this technology has fallen into the hands. It is, even the code has been published. So anybody can write a transformer. Anybody can write a library. So I can put in all of this data and transform it into decisions. And so also is human DNA. Everybody knows everything. So now if somebody wants to target a certain amount of DNA, it can do that. Right? It's the speed. It's the speed and the amount of data that it can consume. That is far more terrifying. So it's who is going to use it, who has the resources to use it, rather than what AI can do. Transformers, anybody can now write a code, write and get things out of AI, right? Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. So Kevin, how have you experienced this issue about ethical and responsible AI?
Mm-hmm. So I think accuracy is very important, especially in the era of generative AI. The information that's being delivered should be accurate. And we don't want information that can lead to political instability or even simple things like superstition to proliferate. There's a funny example circulating online that there was a time when you go to ChatGPT and you ask what would happen if you smash a mirror, and then the answer is, oh, you will have bad luck for 7 years. So we don't want to have inaccurate data goes into the AI system. And at BVT, we ensure that data is accurate, not as mission critical as what perhaps related to politics or military, but simple things like points of interest to make sure that the location of MSMEs are accurate.
Okay, so there's a fair amount of self-regulation that's being done within the company. Okay, good point. Adiguna, have you had any examples or experience where you have faced this dilemma of implementing responsible solutions?
Well, if I have to be honest, it's not the dilemma that we have, it's business opportunities. Because now with deep fakes, deep audio and everything, people are looking for a solution to protect us against that, right? And so this is companies like my company doing now. We are building a systems which can detect deep fakes or deep audios and everything. So yeah, in a way, we are like a good guy, protecting from the bad guy who's trying to use AI for very bad purposes, right? So my take is that it's very difficult for an AI company to be responsible for this kind of thing, right? Because we do whatever it needs to do. Like we have the standard of ISO 27000 and everything. But in order to protect our society from the harms of AI, it needs much more the participation of AI companies. You need the regulations, you need government rules, and also the ethical, which is needs to be instilled in every company who's developing these technologies. So my take right now is that yes, it's going to be there. A lot of harms is going to come from AI, not only in deep fakes and everything, but also some people will use this to develop a weapon, for example, right? Yes, biological weapon or any kinds of weapon, because it's easier to create a gene and medicine with AI. Now, how can we protect the society from that? That's the government's
So I think the key important takeaway here for everybody in the room is that if you're looking at implementing AI solutions, you need a wide range of people helping you out, not just who's got the technology, who's got the application, but also who's ensuring it's doing the right thing. And that balance of solutions will come from a lot of companies who are now in this space and who will be able to help you and assist you in getting the right solution for your business.
Yeah, just to add to that, right, and as Martin also said, right, AI is costly, AI is not cheap, and AI is difficult. So for businesses, it makes sound sense, as I said, take a top-down approach, understand what you want. AI companies like mine, like Arugya.ai, cannot help you if you do not have the right questions. Yeah, we have generic solutions, we have generic platforms that can do it. But instead of first trying to build an entire AI engineering team within your organization, see if there are vendors out there who can help you. First formulate your questions, first formulate your business case. Come to, there are so many people out here, even in Indonesia, like NodeFlux, like us. You can come to us. And then ask yourself whether the cost of replacement of what these guys have done is enough, is sufficient, or is it far more better to have that cost in-house? So when that situation comes in, even then, let us know, we can make it cheaper for you.
Okay, got it. So we're going to move right now into something about experiencing AI. And remember in the beginning I said that everybody here has experience. Can I have a show of hands of who here has experienced interacting with an AI customer service tool? You know, this is when you go to an airline, you go to a booking, and then a chat bot comes up, and then they start questioning you, answering you, and you answer back. Okay, who has had a successful or a happy experience with it? Any show of hands? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I saw about 20, 25 people who have experienced it, only 4 or 5 are actually happy with the interaction. It's an important thing here because it's early days. It's early days of you interacting with the chatbot, interacting with a so-called human intelligence who's trying to replace another real human person within that company. So the question to the panelists, a quick one because we are running on a countdown. What's your view on where we are today with giving customer experience and personalization a really good solution? I mean, say, are you safe or happy to leave that to your chatbots and AI bots to deal with the most important person in your business, who's your customer?
Yeah, the customer, right? So very interesting point. So actually, a couple of years ago, I did a survey for another company of mine. We did a survey, and most of, I think it is generation alpha, generation beta, I don't know, the latest generation, they would love to have a non-personal experience because for us, it matters, we are talking to a human being. For them, it was even much more better if they could talk to a machine because there was no commitment. So there was no conflict. So if the car salesman is a machine and he or she can say, or a jewelry, right? We interviewed a lot of variety from jewelry buying to car buying to all of the important decisions. And they were happy to interact with bots.
Machine.
With bots, right, yeah, machines, rather than human beings. Because human beings, they say, sometimes we make wrong decisions because we get emotionally attached to that person and we start thinking, so they are much more happier doing that.
Interesting point, yeah.
Correct? And the second point about it is these bots are getting really, really smart. So 2 years ago, they were in kindergarten. Right now, they are just graduating. And within 2 years, they will have a doctorate. So they will absolutely, I met a very interesting character yesterday. And he was saying that they are now inputting psychology terms into the chatbot so you can actually have a makeup of what that person's emotional mood is based on his words, based on how he's presenting it. Is he angry? Is he sad? Is he depressed? And so on and so forth. So it's a long road, but it's getting there very quickly and very fast.
So this is actually now into the Q&A session. Do we have 5 minutes for the Q&A? Okay. So any questions from the audience here? Would anybody like to have a question to the panelists? Martin, you?
No, I can't ask questions.
There's one here.
Yeah, please. Can you get the microphone? Kindly introduce yourself and...
Yeah, hi, I'm Malcolm.
Yes.
As you can gather by my look and physique, I'm an expat who's lived in Indonesia for about 15, 17 years. My primary focus in my working life has been FMCG, food and beverage, and ultimately providing solutions for those organisations, the Unilevers, Nestle, Coca-Cola, we all know them. My question about AI and business, and particularly with an Indonesian focus, all my life I've worked with companies that have what we call intellectual property. Part of the value of that organisation has been the goodwill and the ownership of that intellectual property. So in my company, we have algorithms, we have processes that are unique and protected under law in the US, in Australia, and the UK. With the advent of AI, we now go down this path. Is intellectual property no longer something that you can add value to your company? Are these processes, can you keep them unique? What are the challenges from the three people here do you see in the valuation of a business going forward, and how, with AI, are there protections in place? Do we need compliance and governance from a government to control this, or can we build it into our artificial intelligence solutions?
So that's an excellent question. It kind of sums up a lot of other questions that you may have in your mind. Would you like to take a crack, Adiguna, first?
Okay, so this is interesting questions. And this has been also a challenge for us as a company. So the problem with protecting the IP for AI company is first, you need to make sure that the data that you get is from the right source. Secondly, the algorithm that you built is something that you built on your own. The problem is that when we are building any kinds of AI product, the algorithms are already there, the models is already there. The large language model that we are using is open source, right? So the problem is how can we protect this as an IP? But there is a way to do that. I will maybe share a little bit. So if we can protect it by combining with some hardware or appliance, then it's more likely that you'll be successful in applying for your patents or your IP. But if it's just a software, okay, and your software is built on top of any kinds of open source models or algorithms, I think it's going to be very challenging.
Okay. Maybe Kevin, you want to take a shot at the question?
Yes, I think protecting intellectual property is very important, especially in the era of generative AI. Let's say you get a content generated by ChatGPT. You don't know, right, whether it's the sources of where the content was generated from. So how do we go about addressing this challenge? I think we need better traceability in the AI system. So what are the sources, where they are from, and perhaps if the sources are copyrighted materials themselves, they should not be entered into the AI system. So going back to your question about protecting your intellectual property, I think the first thing to do, just to ensure that your internal information doesn't get leaked or go into the internet or public discourse, because once they are out there, they can be entered into the AI system without you consciously knowing about it.
So Vijay, don't you think there are some closed loop AI solutions which don't have to expose private information to the general public?
Okay. So let me understand Malcolm's question more properly, right? So algorithms are universal. Let's be very clear about it. But algorithms have three things inside it which makes that algorithm very powerful. One of it is the variables and the values that are provided to the variables. The second one is the underlying data, and the third is the sequencing of these algorithms. Not all algorithms can be sequenced, right? So all of these are private processes. So if you're going to patent an algorithm, that's not going to happen. But if you're going to patent the entire process of these algorithms, and you can go to any US patent or worldwide patent, that can be patented. And now about disclosure. Can somebody come into your office and actually see the entire process and build a model based on what you have done? They can go out and replicate it, but he has to do his own research and development. He cannot, it's not a lift and shift. You agree with that, right? It's not a lift and shift. It's not that easy, because if it was that easy, everybody would be building an atom bomb in his garage, right? So it's, everybody knows the formula. It's there on YouTube, but can you build one, right? And there are other people who will sell you uranium and radioactive uranium. Even then you cannot do it, right? So there are many people out there, oh, I got this algorithm from your company, and it works. You know, they are successful. You can implement it, and I will charge you $1 million. Not that easy, right? So it's quite a very rigorous question that you have asked, and there are many, many angles and dimensions that we'll have to look at to see how better you can protect yourself in not disclosing everything altogether. And to answer your question on a closed-loop system, it is a closed-loop system, right? I can get it. He can even write it down. These are the algorithms. If he doesn't give me the steps, then it is no good of a formula,
that's the
right?
point, yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
So that's
excellent. So I think we can continue this conversation beyond this in the coffee break or all, but I think we have just had enough time to close the session. So I would like to ask everybody to give a warm round of applause to our great panelists. Thank you very much. And if we could have a token of appreciation to the speakers. Okay, now everybody gather together for a quick group photo. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to give this back to Chris, our great MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin. Lovely pace to that very, very vibrant panel. And we're moving straight on with our fourth panel. So just to remind guests, if you'd like to take tea, coffee, refreshments and bring them back to your tables at your own convenience, you're very welcome to do so. This fourth panel is how can geospatial software help with ESG initiatives? Extremely topical, at the front and center of most corporate thinking. Over to Ian Betts to introduce his panelists. Ian.
Thanks very much once again, Chris, for that. Entering into our fourth panel, as you mentioned, we're going to be speaking about ESG. ESG is a pivotal element in business today: environment, social, and governance. It's a matter of great importance to Indonesia. Indonesia very successfully launched its G20 in Bali last year. ESG, the energy transition, was front and center in those events. And Indonesia had a very successful week there with world leaders and the government assembled with the private sector to drive forward the energy transition, the JETP fund, and ESG. We're here today with this panel to talk about ESG, and we're very pleased to have with us Mr. Setiadi Hadi Prayitno, Country Manager of ERM Indonesia. Terima kasih banyak, Pak Setiadi. Please. Good to see you. And we have Mr. Min Tun, again, CEO of Bumi Vata Technology. Min, if you would join us. Thank you very much, Min. and Mr. Brett Mattis, Founding Secretary of Yayasan Tunas Hijau Lestari. Thank you very much, Brett. You can join us there with Min. We'll kick things off. Please, if you would. Yeah. So I think we're going to start off, Min. I think you have an image to post. Are we going to have that up there? Do we have the
Jessica?
Miranda? Let's see if that comes up. We were going to have an illustration to lead us into this conversation on ESG. Everyone here has got experience in this ERM. We've spoken before about some of these matters. And perhaps while we're waiting for the image to come up, I could start off with you. Perhaps we could explore with you, you're using data, I'm assuming, in ERM.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could explain to the audience how you're using that data, and more specifically, how you're leveraging geospatial data for your environmental monitoring, etc., in the projects you have.
Right, thanks. Let me start from one phrase that you may have heard before, from boots to boardroom. Have you heard about that impressions, right? So this is like a main philosophy of the way we can use I call it geospatial and AI or IoT things, right? So we are helping clients, like for instance, the one that just you said about the energy transitions, or now the other topics is most of mining company now are trying to improve the image, are trying to get some certifications from the global. So towards that certification, they will have to make a lot of promises, a lot of targets, right? And those targets are usually scattered nationwide. So now, how can this asset perform as been promised, right? So this is where the geospatial and AI or IoT take place, because then all the data from all those scattered data from the assets will have to be in boardrooms dashboard. Right? That's how we need data from. So for me, I mean, looking at our experience lately with energy companies, with the geothermal, with mining companies, they all need those kind of technology or knowledge, put that way, right? So we do what. So in assisting client, what we do is we tell them what to do and how to do to, let's say, reducing the carbon footprint, or reducing the how do you call it, the greenhouse gas, because most of companies are now have putting some pledge by 2040 or 2050 they will have to reach certain level. So in order to be able to reach those level, we're telling them what to do, right? And then after that, we're also telling them how to do it. And then once they agree on how to do it, this is where companies like BVT can play their role to working with us together, or you can working directly to the client to bring those data back to the dashboard, and then let the decision maker make decisions about those data based on that data. So that's how it works, Ian, right now.
Thank you very much, Pak Sajid, for kicking us off with that. We will revert to you on some more detail of the kinds of services that you're providing and how you're leveraging that data. But perhaps I could turn to Min. We had your image on the screen a little earlier. We've lost it now in the circulation. But perhaps, you know, we've heard from you a couple of times already, and you were in the questions, that the geospatial tools that you're bringing to energy planning and infrastructure, for example, these are essential elements of Indonesia's own development. How do you see geospatial technology and softwares contributing to and driving that infrastructure development and energy planning?
ESG and Sustainable Development Goals are such a massive domain, so I think we need to stay a little bit focused. And what geospatial technology, whether it is Lokasi or Esri or whatever it is, what we can provide is the technology that can end-to-end track, trace, verify, and report of each activity of each business processes. And the likes of geothermal, they have a lot of moving parts in terms of logistics, supply chain, moving energy from here to there, et cetera, all very much data-driven. I am not personally an expert in geothermal, although I have worked in the energy sector for 20 years, but mostly in oil and gas and upstream exploration. So I have seen the impact that we've generated in the environment. So in a nutshell, what we can provide is one of the biggest issues today we have with these goals of carbon net zero neutral and all of that in 2020, 2030, 40, 50, etc. People are making effort to plant the tree, whatever the efforts are, and then carbon credits are going to be becoming very commonly traded on the stock exchanges. The difficulty, the challenges is, to start with, is the modeling. ASEAN has its own model, EU has its own model, America has its own model. They still haven't agreed on what the models look like and how we're going to value a planting of a tree in, like I always say to you guys, planting a tree in Norway has very little impact on environment compared to planting a tree in the central Jakarta, for instance, where there is a lot more pollutants in the air. So, yeah, we will allow and we will enable that through the technology to track, how your logistics, how your supply chain, how you maximize your trucking, how you maximize your warehousing, how do you deliver products. Then the knock-on effect will be, direct financial saving in terms of not having to have a lot of stocks or getting raw materials on time and not having to, have a lot of stocks and where the funds are sitting. So that's, in a nutshell, we can do that. And then it is because we can blockchain it in terms of technology perspective. So it is fully, you can authenticate it fully, you can trace it, fully transparent and fully verifiable. So that is going to become, I believe, in the next 10 years, to be the real question of what carbon credit is valued at what, and so on and so forth. That's where we can make a lot of...
Well, thanks very much, Min. So we've heard from Pak Sediadi, who's exploring how geospatial and other softwares can be used in these fields, and you've talked about the benefits and the impacts of that, where that's going. Perhaps I could turn to Brett. Brett, like many of us in the room, you've had long experience in Indonesia. You've been in industry prior to the advent of big data, data analytics, geospatial software, etc. How have you seen this impacting on your projects and your work in the fields where you're active?
In a word, Ian, hugely. And I'd like to start with a kind of general statement in answer to your question. And then if there's time and you're willing to ask me a pointed question, I'll give you some examples of what I mean. The general statement is that good ESG strategy or strategies encompassing things like the energy transition and management of carbon. And this is across supply chains, yeah? Companies can no longer see themselves as isolated part of a supply chain. They're an integrated part of a supply chain, and they have to understand how the supply chain works. But I think developing those sort of strategies provides one of the most compelling growth and profitability opportunities facing companies across a plethora of sectors right now in 2023, in the next decade. So examples, probably pretty obvious ones, some of the oldest of human activities, managing forests, managing agriculture and aquaculture, renewable energy should have been on the top of my list, the electric vehicle ecosystem, and what else? Logistics. Yeah, I was going to say fuel or energy-based logistics, but all logistics impact on or impacted on by the energy industry. So all of those things. And what do they all have in common? They all use geospatial data, all of those sectors. And it's not as, you know, when I came into the energy industry, the most obvious places where geospatial data were used were in the extractive resource sector. Now it's everybody has to use it. Everybody needs you, Min. Yeah. Everybody needs you.
Thank you very much, Brett. And let's explore where some of these initiatives may have been applied in ESG. Perhaps, Satyajit, if I could come back to you, perhaps you could give us a case study example or two on how you've applied these technologies in an ESG context. ESG is now a compliance code for all industries. Brett has listed a great many of them, and I know you're active in almost all of them in your sustainability portfolio. A case study.
All right. We all know ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, right? But at the moment, what we are really active is on the ES. We haven't touched much on the G side. Not because we don't want to touch it, because simply because the implementation of what should I say, the geospatial was a bit less in the governance sector. But when you ask me about what ERM Indonesia has experienced in doing this, right? I could give you one example. Currently, now we are working together with one of the largest nickel mining in Indonesia, right? Is in eastern part of Indonesia, right? So they are now struggling to get some sort of certification from the international, especially a lot of big buyers like Glencore or Tesla or Volkswagen. They have put a certain standard in terms of traceability, where the nickel comes from, did you mine it correctly, did you damage the water, did you damage the forest, right? So we came to them and they said to us, can you help us to get this level of certifications? Then we agree on certain actions and certain promises and certain numbers that they have to achieve at a certain time. So in order to be able to let's for instance, they are now disposing a lot of contaminated water, put that way, to the river. There's one example. So now we told them, you have to control this effluent to a certain level that can be acceptable for the environment. Now, and then we put some sort of like sensors or AI, but we didn't do that. He did. A company like him did that. So we spoke with other company than BVT, right, to install some sensors or parameters, something like that. And then the output was, we gathered the data, and then, based on the data, the management make decision what sort of improvement we have to make. And this is on a daily basis until such time they have reached a certain level of acceptable contaminations or acceptable effluent level. So that's a small example, but again, like Ian said, the implementation of geospatial and AI in the ESG, sky is the limit right now. For me, sky is the limit, and then it just started, because most of large corporations has just start to make promises, start to make a pledge. And then they're now moving into the implementation stage. This is where you guys can play.
I think you're absolutely right. Thanks for highlighting that. One of the earlier panels brought up the term inevitability. So I think it's not just inevitable, but because this is ESG, which is a legal requirement, it's now part of compliance.
Yeah, and now it's not nice to have, you must have.
Indeed, indeed. Let's turn back to Min, if I may. Perhaps you could offer us some more examples to add on to the concrete one we've just had. Nickel, of course, in EV is one of the leading investments now in Indonesia. It's galvanizing a great deal of media coverage across the world and investment coming in. How are you seeing that being applied, and is there a net benefit for your company and your software?
I think we've spoken quite a bit on nickel. So Indonesia being one of the lungs of the world, Borneo, one of the developments that we are developing is imagine, and the other big produce of Indonesia is palm oil, right? So let's take forestry and deforestation and reforestation. So if I have 10,000 hectares of wild palm trees, with the geospatial technology, with the application of AI or AIoT and drone, for example, we can actually monitor down to individual tree the temperature. How do we put water on the plant? What kind of water do we need? Water, sometimes you need to spray from on top, and sometimes you need to put it subterranean, sometimes you need to spray in the stem of the trees. So we can, when you are looking at 1 million palm tree, we can actually go and pinpoint whether this is this grid or that grid or individual tree or whatever, and then we can monitor individual trees' health or each individual grid's health. So thereby we enhance the productivity, like earlier panel was talking about it. The knock-on effect of doing that is if you can maximize the water usage, and water is the next scarce resource that we've got, right? Instead of spending 100 million ton of water every month, if we can focus and dedicate the area where the water needs to go into, if we can save 20% every month, that is 80 million ton of water use and 20 million saved. So, so there is a lot of tangible, immediate financial gains to be had. And at the same time, you increase your productivity by, we don't know how much, but we can run some models and numbers on that. That's on the plantation owner perspective, right? Then we come back to the side of Ministry of Forestry where they want to reforest. So we can actually do detailed studies on, this part of the reforestation project. The air pollution index has gone down, the ppm has gone down, the temperature has cooled down a bit, et cetera, and how this knock-on effect will provide the environment. So, if because of the environment is cooler, if we can reduce 1 degree on our air conditioning in the house, that has a lot of knock-on effect. So, like Pat say, the sky is the limit. Is up to our imagination. That's number one. And number two is the willingness of the corporations, not virtue signaling, actually caring and doing something about it. We are a data analytics company. Geospatial just happened to be the tool that we use, right? So whatever the data that we have, whatever the data that we can get access to from our partners or clients or whatever we want to call them, And if we have unified objective goals, there's not a lot we cannot do. We can do pretty much whatever it is needed.
Thanks very much, Min. We've talked about the environmental element of ESG. We talked about mining and nickel. We talked about forestry. I would like to explore the social impact very briefly. But first, I'd like to turn back to Brett and ask Brett an example, a case study from you on something from your recent experience with regard to ESG. Would you have one?
Yeah, I was sitting there thinking, listening to the comments, what example would best suit you and this audience. So I'll carry on the theme of water. And I preface this by saying that we have clients, a number of clients, more every week actually, that ask for help with ESG strategies for compliance. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here, and the example I'm about to give, and I could have chosen a number of examples, from a number of examples, but what I'm talking about here is ESG for sustainability and profitability. So the example I wanted to give, because it involves water, is my Yayasan is doing a project in Kalimantan that on behalf of 70 villages, and these villages want to conserve their forest, and it's mostly primary forest, large area of primary forest. This is a big area. This is 3 million hectares. It's the size of the state of New Jersey in the United States. Now, those villages want to conserve their forest because they want to conserve their watershed. But it so happens that forests are also pretty good at sequestering carbon. So there's a potential revenue stream coming from carbon. There are other revenue streams coming from specialized activities based on the forest, the use of the forest. So interesting project, which you can see involves multiple dimensions, multiple. Now, it's very data intensive. Why? Because you can't ground truth 3 million hectares of forest. You can't go and measure every tree. So what do? You go out and you find a pilot area of a couple of thousand hectares, and you go in on the ground with the villagers, and you measure everything. And it actually doesn't take that long. So you measure all the species, flora and fauna, and then you take those data, those ground truth data, and you apply them to satellite imagery. And the satellite imagery does cover the whole 3 million hectares. And algorithms are then written. AI is extremely prominent in this activity. Algorithms are written that then relate what's been seen and proven on the ground to large areas of raster and vector data obtained by the satellites. And so I could go on, but you can see where I'm heading with this. This
Absolutely.
is enormously geospatial data intensive, and it's a highly innovative and profitable activity on behalf of a bunch of villages.
Thanks, Brett, for sharing that example. I think that really does demonstrate what the use is. Final point here before we go into questions, social impacts. Min, if I could start with you. A very brief example of a social impact. Brett's given us an excellent one for the environment and villages. Another?
Social impact, let's take supply chain, right? Say you are an organization which is operating 20,000 fleet of trucks. So we can enable each truck to be connected to our geospatial system, and we can monitor how they're driving, their fatigue level, and what speed they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. You can see where I'm going with that too. So from then on, we can actually decrease driver fatigue, right? And we can actually monitor it physically. They can have wearable devices, for example. So the knock-on effect, so that's from the social perspective, right? So we immediately drop the risk of the driver having a crash or whatever. But on the other side of it, we can actually monitor the fleet of how the trucks are being driven, whether or not they are slowing down the potholes, whether or not they are slowing down on the humps. So every time you accelerate away, it takes more fuel. That means you're going to get more greenhouse gases. That means you're going to spend more money on fuel. That means you're going to have more breakages on tire or suspension or whatever. Or, yeah. So, you know, so it is what we want to measure, how we want to measure. But the problem here is, not just here, I mean, generally speaking in Southeast Asia and West Africa, is organizations don't look at TCO, total cost of ownership. Right? They just, oh, this is expensive. But if you actually work it out, if I can save a fleet of 20,000 trucks, 2% fuel consumption drop, 2% tire consumption drop, 2% on mechanical breakages. The system pays for itself in 6 months. So coming back to the social part of it, so you know, if we can increase one driver's fatigue and preventing from having an accident, a child out there is not going to be fatherless, right? So there are many, many other examples. That's just one example that I can think of.
We're gonna thank you for that. Thank you for highlighting that. Perhaps Sajid, I'm going to hold you back for the questions. Open the floor to questions if we have any. Yes, Pat Vijay, if you will start with Pat Vijay, an earlier panelist. And who would you like to address your question to, or is it a general one?
I think it's all Min's fault, right? So he put in something that is very dear and near to my heart. So how long do you think driverless cars will come to Indonesia? And what role will BVT play in that era?
Thank you for that question. How
Martin
are we
is already nodding his head.
Well, you know, autonomous level 4 is already out there, right? I mean, there are test cases and things like that. I think to answer the question, not actually answering your question, is the country's infrastructure. We need to start with the divider lines on the street first before we can talk about any autonomous vehicle. So I think the question should be directed to the government, road networking, putting the proper signages, lane markings and things like that. Before we can, before we go and do this autonomous level 4, 3, 2, 1, I think the question is, where's the infrastructure?
I think the government has this week announced it is implementing AI in traffic signaling now. So perhaps that's the first step. Yeah, no, I know you'd be pleased, Martin. Yeah.
Well, no, that could be a solution if people do it objectively, right? The key is the technology is available, the funding is available. Is that everything in the middle? Subjectivity, corruption, all of that stuff
Well, that's
is
the governance
preventing.
element that we're talking about in ESG. Yeah, and that's another element here. Let's throw the floor open to another question if we have one, and explore this further. Anyone on governance or to pick up any of these other issues that we've talked about?
The governance part of it.
I think there is a good governance element here to talk about if we have a question. Otherwise, I'd like to ask Pak Setiadi, we did shy away from governance earlier. Perhaps I could, and I'm not going to ask you about that now, but perhaps on the social impact element, a final question for you. Are you seeing any applications here for the social impact in the data mapping that you're doing for your projects?
Well, honestly, our experience in the social impact related is pretty minimum. So I cannot give you much of example we have done, because the most of our work now is predominantly we're doing the environmental and with minimum social right now.
And I think here we're really identifying a gap here for ESG and possibly for data, software, and the industry. Yeah. And that is that it appears that governance is not being tackled to the same degree that the environment and social impacts are. And that is an issue where compliance is challenged in a country in Southeast Asia here, the largest economy in Southeast Asia, where ESG is now a legal compliance feature for so many industries. So I think that's a very important gap for us to highlight. And on that note, having highlighted that, I'd like to say thank you very much, Mr. Minton, CEO of Bhumivata, also to Pat Satyadi, Senior Partner at ERM, and Brett Matters. Thank you very much for joining us on this panel. And I believe we do have from, Jessica will come up, we do have a small token of appreciation. So thank you very much to everyone. Min, I think, oh, is it Martin? Are you going to do the honours, Martin? Or Mr. Topolowski Senior, please. Thank you. Token of appreciation from Mr. Brett Matters. Thank you very much, Brett, for joining us today. Thank you. Round of applause for them, please. And for Mr. Satyadi, ERM. Thank you very much. Token of appreciation for Mr. Satyadi, ERM. Thank you. And from the room, thank you very much for joining us today. And there's even one for Mr. Minton. We know you're trying to save money, but you've got to do this, Martin. So, yeah, go ahead. Token of appreciation for your own CEO. Thank you. What could be better? Thank you very much, everyone. I'll be handing back to Chris Wren. Gents, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Rather looked more like mutual appreciation, didn't it? Photo to come. While that photo is taking place, if I could just remind our moderator, Ian, who's done his 2 sessions, we'll be looking for a 60-second sum up from you after Sachin has done his panel 5. Thank you, Ian. And panelists, we move now to our final panel of this morning, and this is supply chain digitalization. To introduce his panel for his 3rd session, he's a man not looking fatigued at all, full of energy. Sachin.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Chris. As we move into our last panel, we're going to speed up things a bit. I'd like to invite our panelists to the stage. Julian A.F. Smith, President Director of Pete Samudra Logistics Services. Please come on the stage. Thank you. Parivan Harits, Head of Sales, Bhumivata Technology. Parivan? Yes. And Subianto Vindoro, the CEO of Akar Inti Data. Please. Thank you very much. We're going to go right away into this. We have a 20-minute session here. So I'll give you a little bit of background on supply chain. The topic. Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. I'm going to go into the topic right away. I'll give you a little bit of context and background before we get into the discussion. Well, you know, supply chain has been a topic of optimization by all companies for the longest of time. It's nothing new. What is new is the word digitalization, and that brings a new element of how we manage supply chain. Right from the beginning of sourcing raw materials to making your product, to selling it, and then delivering it to the final customer. That's the entire chain of process of supply chain. It involves a lot of people, it involves organizations, processes, tools, technology. All of these are the various elements that are part of the ecosystem of supply chain. However, when you look at digitalization, you suddenly have new words that get introduced. For example, what's warehouse management systems now? What is geolocation tools? What is drones? How does autonomous vehicles come into the play? What are the various automation platforms that are available? So there are new elements to supply chain that is actually really transforming this whole landscape. And key areas that are now under discussion for this is data management, which is a very important part of it. process integration so that all the processes start talking to each other. And the last part of it is using of digital tools. The two digital tools that replace or augment physical processes that have been taking place so far. So these are the three main elements of the digitalization of supply chain, which we need to talk about. And we have a very eminent panel here, and I'm going to go straight away into the discussion. I would like to understand a little bit about, I'll start with Julian. Do you agree with this definition of supply chain management, or do you have some other view of how it's being approached right now?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me along today. No, I agree with the definition. We are actually an operator in the actual supply chain space. A lot of the efforts we're making to basically improve our service, to improve transparency, to improve the decision-making process and the management of volume is really coming from the customers, which unfortunately, or on the reality perspective, is really down to the basis of cost. Yeah. The idea is basically we are providing a lot more transparency. We're using the process of digitalization to improve the way in which we do things, which ultimately come down to the cost associated with running the process.
So very much a very deep part of the investment being made by Samudra at the moment.
Very much so, yes.
Okay. So Parivan, from a Bhumi Varta technology perspective, you have 2 or 3 technologies which are very relevant here. One is, of course, your geolocation product and your data management product, etc. So how do you view the efforts being done by your company in this particular space right now?
So first of all, I do believe that digitalization in supply chain, also logistic companies, is pretty important. And we do understand that many big companies in Indonesia, sometimes they don't or even refuse to be implementing this kind of technology, right? And then when you ask about what type of solution or maybe solution that can be implemented for supply chain or logistic company, I think the first one could be like for the route optimizations. So when we deliver goods from warehouses to distribution centers, and then there is actually many factors that can be contaminated into which type of distribution center is supposed to be delivered first, right? Let's say, for example, for the number of vehicle, manpower, and then maybe the opening store itself, and then working hours and many others. And by implementing geospatial intelligence and big data technology into the systems, we could actually recommend you and which type of stores need to be delivered first, and then we could make it more efficient and then a better route.
So everything you're saying is actually talking about optimization.
Yes.
Is there anything apart from optimization that's there in this whole way of digitalization supply chain?
Yes. Not only for route optimization, but we could also recommend for business profiling, for example. Investing in warehouses for supply chain is very big amounts, right? Therefore, when we try to locate new warehouses or distribution centers, we have to understand better about the area itself, whether the buying power, the demographics such as age, gender, education, and many others data. We have to make sure that when we open a warehouse, the distribution centers are already there, and then the market are fit to the product or services that we are providing with.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, Pak Subianto, how is your organization approaching supply chain digitalization? What are you doing in this space?
We're a data analytics company that has we also have what we call data marketplace, where we connect many data providers with data consumers. Now, the ability for us to be able to help a number of different organizations, including supply chain management processes, is to be able to connect multiple data sources from various sources that may add to the initial first-party CRM that company to process data, to enrich information, so they can make a more accurate predictions and modeling for whatever business use cases that they need. In the case of supply chain management, a lot of times, companies' first-party CRM data is not sufficient for them to be able to make that level of accuracy or predictions. They need information about, for example, about the situations on the roads.
Real-time situations.
Real-time situations, right? Usually, companies can only have information about their own supply chain information, about the inventory, about the movement of their goods, but they need additional data with respect to weather, with respect to potential
Traffic,
information on
maybe.
traffic, exactly, they may need to get from elsewhere. So we help them with those.
Okay, so you integrate that entire to get a proper solution.
In a sense, yeah. So our marketplace essentially creates a way for data providers to monetize their data within our system. So any kind of data consumers who need additional data can purchase them through this exchange.
Okay, excellent. So, moving on to what are the nitty-gritties of supply chain digitalization? One of the things is the tools that are used. Internet of Things is a big area, and real-time tracking, supply chain operations, etc., come into play. Because data capture is the starting point, right? Once you capture data, then you can use data, you can track it, etc., and see how the data can be manipulated for a better solution. So, I'm going to Julian. Having been, I think, one of the leading supply logistics company in the country, I know your company for a long time now. How have you looked at implementing IoT solutions, and what stage are you in that?
Okay, so I just want to expand a little bit on that. In relation to the tools which we're looking at, basically we're not only looking at IoT, we're also looking at artificial intelligence and digital twins. At the moment, in relation to our warehousing business, we're looking to basically implement a new WMS, which will provide us with a lot more visibility to our customers, a lot more process efficiencies, and a lot better way of basically running our operations. If we start looking at technologies such as digital twins, we're starting to look at basically three-dimensional footprints of our warehousing to basically better manage traffic flows within the warehouse, which allows us to be more efficient, but also basically reduce cost in the amount of movements that we have to make within the warehouse. If we look at artificial intelligence, we're looking at basically data analytics. We're looking at basically historical data for customers in relation to their flow, in relation to their size of packaging, to be able to assist them reduce their cost. Internet of Things is basically more in relation to tracking of our trucking, to be able to make sure we're minimizing the cost on that side of things. We're also basically looking at optimization of storage by procuring new WMSs, making sure we have TMSs in place. So once again, unfortunately or fortunately, the reality is that digitalization and the tools associated with digitalization is really being driven by cost, to be able to reduce our cost, but also to basically provide our customers with more visibility and more control and understanding of actually how we manage their product. Historically, logistics or its supply chain has pretty much been a little bit of a black box in relation to what actually happens to people's customers. So the transparency, the visibility is something which is becoming more paramount as a request from our customers. How we manage it, how long it takes us to manage it, what are our processes, and so on. So we're using the digital technology tools to be able to reduce our cost and provide more transparency overall.
So it sounds like there's a very large deployment of this technology that's going on at Samudra.
It is, and Samudra has been in operation since 1964. We have a very strong sister company in Samudra Praweda, and we have historically developed a lot of our own in-house software. We're in the process of basically, we've just run an RFP to choose a new WMS for all our warehouses within the group. We specifically made that decision to go external, purely because when you develop technology in-house, it's kind of, sometimes you can fall to the errors of having the blinkers on per se, where you are developing software for the moment or for the current processes. A lot of the times when you go external, you can have a lot more of a holistic view of the development of the software. And also the software which is taking advantage of the specific trends in the market, so such as the use of AI, the use of different technology tools, as we discussed before, internet, IoT, and also the digital twins and so on. So we get a lot more access to a different view of technology and the development of that technology. So Samudra has made a very strong commitment to choosing a third-party new WMS, and that will be implemented at the start of 2024.
Fantastic. So actually, I would like to ask you this question, but I'm going to ask it to Rivan instead. how do you see the difference between a large company like Samudra, which is now doing digital transformation and getting into this, versus some of the new companies that have no experience in supply chain logistics, but have opened up logistics companies? Is there a difference between these two types of companies?
Yeah, there is two types because some big company may be more open to new technology, right? I mean, like they have been implementing few years back then, but as for like new company or smaller company, sometimes the resources are not as big as the big company ones. However, it's better start than never, right? So we can start with the technology first, and then just like you mentioned, since this is about Internet of Things, I would like to also agree with what's being said by Pak Julian also about the reduced cost and also transparency about that. So yeah, it could be different from big company and small companies.
Okay. So, you know, Pa Subianto, do you see there's an opportunity for collaboration between large organizations that need to transform or digitally transform into supply chain solutions versus all these new startup companies which may be coming up with great ideas, new technology, new solutions? Is there some opportunity there?
Oh, the answer is absolutely, right? I mean, let me put a little bit of context that in Indonesia specifically, right, we're talking about supply chain management. There are two main unique factors that are exclusive to Indonesia. One is that Indonesia is an archipelago nation, right? So we have over 13,000 islands, and that can create and pose significant logistic challenges. It's unlike the situations, for example, like continental US or Australia, where it's not clear whether distribution channels would be effective in Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you do inter-island transportation. And also, we add a layer of complexity when you transport perishable goods, for example, right? Second uniqueness in Indonesia is that the number of small, medium, and micro businesses in Indonesia is tremendous.
Yeah.
Right. Indonesia is a very entrepreneurial society. I think, I don't know what different numbers are being thrown around, but roughly right now is around 65 million small, medium, and micro businesses in Indonesia.
65 million.
Exactly. So just as a comparison, right, the entire population of Malaysia is only 30 million. So we have more than twice as many businesses here in Indonesia. And that requires unique solutions. It's not going to be a cut and paste from solutions that probably already work in different areas or different nations to Indonesia, and that requires some ingenuity and innovation.
Yeah. So Julian, coming back to you, and following the thread of the discussion, right? Do you see a lot of competition? What's a competitive landscape for you like? You know, Samudra, well-established, great infrastructure, getting into digital, versus a lot of these new, younger startups coming up with all kinds of new solutions.
Yeah, absolutely, and we definitely welcome the competition. And actually, we've been a lot more proactive in relation to that. One of the key things for us is basically asset utilization, and I can give you an example. There is a relatively new startup which is part of the Anta Aja group, which is called Cold Space. We've had many discussions with them, and we're a little bit jealous at times because they are so nimble and that they are so, in a sense, creative. And what they're trying to do is basically reduce the transit or reduce the time of shipment in relation to cold space or reefer containers coming in from the terminal and then direct distribution. So what we've done is basically we've worked with them, we're sharing with them the location of our warehouses so that they can basically utilize our warehouse space on very much a short-term basis to be able to meet the demand which they have. So in this specific example, we don't see it as a competition. We see it as more as an opportunity to collaborate. Which is better off for everyone. But the supply chain space, the logistics space is a very large industry within Indonesia. And there's room for everyone to be competitive and everyone to survive. So that's how we look at it.
So that's actually interesting that you're looking at this as the entire industry can transform together. Because technology plays a big role, it makes everybody efficient, and it actually overall improves.
Look, at the end of the day, we're in a service industry, and we're here to basically service customers from different levels.
And kudos, I think that's a great approach as well, and attitude as well for helping the industry grow together. So, I'd like to ask Rivan about, predictive analytics, demand forecasting, etc., and the supply chain optimization. These are the key, I would say, points of interest which you guys are working on. Am I right?
Yes,
could you
correct.
share something about that?
Yes, so about predictive analytics, we actually, by implementing geospatial intelligence into the predictive analytic, it could be very much beneficial. Because let's say, for example, if you already distribute all over Indonesia, maybe not every area in Indonesia that you are performing well, let's say, for example, and then some are bad, some are good. So in BVT, we do that in some of our cases. For example, we took the best location one. Let's say, for example, out of 300 stores, we took 30 out of their top performing stores, and then we could find the similarities around that area. Let's say, for example, for within 5 kilometers, we have find similarities. They have minimum 15 attempts for the top performing stores. And then we could also analyze the bad one, the not performing one. And then we find out that, let's say, for example, within 5 kilometers, there is less than 10 ATMs, and then maybe there is no housing in that area, and many other parameters that we could provide it for them. Therefore, if they would like to expand in some new area, we could find out about the area that have similarities with the best performing one, and then avoiding the bad one. So it could predict actually about our performances in the future on.
So these are early days. I think it's not been very long that such kind of approaches have been used in supply chains. I think we'll see more and more of how this gets utilized.
More data sets, and
okay.
we could have.
Okay, so I want to jump into the sustainability issues, okay? What are the sustainability considerations? I'm pointing this to you, Pa Subianto. Sustainability is an issue in digital supply chain, digitalization of supply chain, right? What are the considerations that you think we should be worried about or we should pay attention to from a sustainability perspective?
Haven't thought about that much, to be honest. Yeah. But going back to, I mean, if we're talking about the micro situations in Indonesia specifically, right? Not elsewhere. When we look at this uniqueness, again, going back to so many different small, medium, and micro businesses all across Indonesia.
Yeah.
Distribution channels is very different in the sense that, there isn't really a whole lot of like big box retailers that set up shops with major warehouses, all over the place. But the question is sustainability, being able to ship these goods from the sources all the way down to the retailers.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there's another, I'll throw in another statistics out there, which is that there are less than half of, about half of the Indonesian population does not have a bank account or are underbanked, right?
Correct.
And there are, on the other hand, roughly about 350 million registered phone numbers on mobile phones. Whereas, in Indonesia, there's only 270 million, population in the latest census. So the penetration of mobile technology is something that can be leveraged to maintain sustainability in terms of supply chain management that not a whole lot of companies have taken advantage of these days. When we're talking about IoT technologies and maybe POS technologies, probably the mom and pop shop in the villages don't have the expertise or know how to be able to utilize them. And what's the best way to be able to utilize the existing infrastructures that already had a 90% penetration, in the market? That's probably, the way for the future. So some smaller companies have looked into that, but apparently not as prevalent yet.
Correct. And we haven't yet gone into the next level of supply chain, which is using drones, autonomous vehicles, etc. So we are a long way to go in terms of where all Indonesia can experiment. Am I right? Or would you say that there's no chance of, because of, I think there was a conversation about the road markings not being there, and therefore you can't use autonomous vehicles. Do we see that kind of an issue?
Well, you said roads, it's a one-way street in Indonesia. It's going to be gone and stolen unfortunately.
Okay, so we can actually move into the Q&A. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Mike's running out of charge, so I guess, yeah. So we can go into the Q&A right away. We have a 3-minute Q&A, probably 2 questions. Anybody in the audience would like to ask a question? If you have a raise of hands. Okay, if not, okay, let me get kick-started with this. You still have chance to think of a question. In the way we look at how Indonesia is going ahead with its own supply chain digitalization, because it's a large country, huge demographic, logistics, so many islands, etc. How would you rate Indonesia's readiness in this compared to some of the other more developed countries? Let's look at, okay, the very high developed countries like the US is an obvious one, but let's look at within ASEAN, right? Within ASEAN, like-minded countries, where do you think we are? I'm saying, are you happy with where you are at Samudra? Maybe I'll ask Julian to answer that.
I'm very happy being employed by Samudra. So I have to answer this very technically.
Just trying to get a benchmark, you know what? Yeah. Where are we?
I just want to go back to something which actually was pointed out by Martin before.
Yeah.
When it comes down to basically cost of logistics as a comparison to GDP, Indonesia is about 24%. And a lot of that high cost is basically due to the lack of infrastructure or the failure to upgrade infrastructure. Indonesia has a very large population, and the people of Indonesia are deserving of a much better level of infrastructure. So to make a comparison of Indonesia and Southeast Asia to Singapore and Malaysia is actually not fair.
Okay.
But the commitment from the government, the commitment from companies such as myself, the company that I work for, is there to improve the quality of service and to improve the infrastructure for Indonesia, and will hopefully in the long term or the medium to short term, the cost of logistics will be reduced. So overall, as long as there's a commitment there from all parties, the processes, the infrastructure will get better over time.
Okay.
And that's where we believe.
So what needs to change? I'm saying, what are your biggest barriers or the walls that you're hitting, which you would like solved?
Okay. I don't have a kita, so I'm on a kit up. So at least I'll be here for at least another 5 years. Look, the barriers in relation to the geography of Indonesia, of course, the displacement in relation to the population. I think funding is a key principle of that. Development of infrastructure comes over time. Unfortunately, when you actually put in infrastructure plans in place, there has to be a long-term strategy. And I think that one of the limitations on the government is that there's really, for a long time, there hasn't been a long-term strategy in relation to development of infrastructure across the archipelago. We've seen a large investment in infrastructure in Java and also in Sumatra, but we seem to have left out East Indonesia. So over time, it will definitely improve. But the idea is basically having a long-term strategic plan, which is followed through from government to government, will start to change the landscape and will hopefully reduce the cost of logistics and improve the logistic or the supply chain for the people of Indonesia in the future.
Sure. So maybe a one sentence, what we need to do next in this area from both Rivan and from Pak Subianto. One sentence, what do you think we need to do next in supply chain digitalization? What's coming up?
I think what next to do is about the willingness to implement the new technology, because being resistant sometimes it's not help, because in other countries when they would like to implement things and they would accept it, so we could move forward to the new digitalizations.
Okay. Pak Subianto, one last sentence from you. What do we need to do next?
Definitely collaboration between public and private sectors. No question about it. Per what Samudra was mentioning, there are a lot of infrastructure development that needs to happen before any type of sustainability supply chain management improvement can happen.
Fantastic. With that, I'd like to close this panel. Thank you very much to our very competent speakers. I think, you had the three people in the room here who know a lot about this. Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to give it back to Chris. Thank you. There is a token of appreciation to all our panelists. maybe you'd like to come on stage for a photograph? Yeah. Photo back. Yeah, please. Okay, a group photograph. Let's have everybody in the center, please. Come.
Thank you very much, Sachin. And the fifth and the final panel of today. Sachin, you've got a couple of minutes to gather your thoughts, and then I'll ask you for your elevator summary of about 60 seconds, 2 or 3 very quick key points. But first, in that regard, our moderator for the second and the fourth panel, Ian Betts, for your summary, please, Ian.
I get the chance to interview myself. That's the best bit. So you said 3 or 4. I've actually made 5 points. So am I on the clock? I'm on the clock. So yeah, I think one of the key elements that I think we've learned out of this today is the definition of startups, corporations, and government. And I know you were applauding earlier, Martin, when Rivan mentioned will and willingness. And I think the key here is we have the startups, we have the corporations, we have the beginnings of the digital infrastructure, and some of that is maturing very well with data centers, which are essential. But we need the government will to continue now, next year, with the next presidency, with the next San Diego Uno, with all of those who are going to come in the creative economy and the digital space to follow. We cannot do that without a regulatory environment that supports business and every element within it. In the first panel that I moderated earlier, which was the second panel of the day, regulatory environment for banks came up with Maybank and Pat Soni. I think that's key. Regulatory environment for businesses, for financial transactions, and also for the regulation of the cloud, all who use it, customers, vendors, suppliers, and businesses. Then we also have to understand the nature of software itself, which is your business, whether we're building or buying, and provide that service to corporations. Find a way to ensure that all of those companies that were listed on your logo sheet are actually making a profit next time we have this event, Martin, and not the majority of them making a loss, as you highlighted. So investment here is key. But I think the key point we come back to is the inevitability of this, the fact that there has been an Indonesia roadmap for digital in place since 2014, that this is inevitable, and that in regard to ESG, my final point, massive push forward is required for the governance element in ESG. We have the environment, we have social, governance was lacking clearly in the panel there and its responses. And I'll leave it there, Chris, if I may.
Marvelous, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Sachin, can you beat that? And you've got 3 panels to summarize.
Thank you. So I think I'll try to attempt to summarize it all together rather than one by one. So, my first observation was that, we have really moved on from the days of startups, funding of startups, disruption, and then creation of unicorns, which was the hype or the sex appeal of this whole idea of digital transformation, to now we're talking about existing companies, which is the larger part of business. 80 to 90% of businesses that have existed are undergoing digital transformation. And that, I believe, is the real meat and potatoes of this entire thing, right? Because this transition has cleaned out a lot of companies that were not viable and not sustainable. Startups have undergone 95% failure rate. Where are all these startups that we saw 5 or 10 years ago? There's a handful of them today. But the companies in the room here today and the companies that have existed, adopting digital transformation is the real thing. It's the real game. These are the companies with large amounts of infrastructure, resources, and their ability to absorb the learnings of all these startups and great ideas of young founders and then creating something sustainable out of it is the real opportunity. So I think that's one thing that's really come across very well, especially post-pandemic. That's kind of triggered. The post-pandemic era has triggered the failure rate of startups to a point that only great ideas remain, and there are great companies who can implement them. So I think that's the one key takeaway I've taken. The second takeaway I've seen is that use of AI, use of data analytics, use of tools, use of geolocation, all of these things are real solutions. They're not just mere ideas that are experimenting, trying to change things. They're actually factually and useful in real business. And this is something, it's not a revelation, but it's really a way for companies to start thinking that investing in the right places, right technologies, right ideas is now real. So I'm seeing a lot of companies that are doing what startups started doing as a disruption, et cetera, et cetera. But that's like, a few years ago. Now real solutions are being adopted by real companies, and real technologies have a chance to sustainably build themselves, because you can't really implement something new in a one-year-old company, right? You need the chance to work its way through so that companies can really, really go ahead with using this technology. So those are the two real key takeaways I've seen. It applies across all the three topics that I did. And I look forward to seeing how this will evolve in Indonesia as we go along. Thank you, Chris. I don't think I beat the time.
Also, 2 minutes and 20 seconds, so it's a draw. Thank you both. Extremely brilliant summaries from what have been 5 tremendous panels. I believe Jessica would like to distribute, together with Martin, some mementos. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Sachin. Thank you, Martin. I think if I could ask you to stay up on stage, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we heard at the beginning the thoughts regarding the foundation and the development of BVT Technology from founder Martin Tobolowsky. Now some closing thoughts from CEO Min Tun.
Thank you, Chris. Today, I think, has been a quite informative, I hope. And although I think we would have had a lot more fun if there were more questions from the audience, but never mind. But I'll keep it short. I don't want to stand between you and your lunch. So, first of all, thank you very much for everyone to making the time to joining us this morning. And I hope it was as useful to you as to us. And second of all, for all our MC, Chris, and then the moderator, Sachin, and Ian, as always, thank you very, very much. And hotel staff for putting up a nice, well-organized event for us. And last but not the least, Martin and the team putting this thing together over the past 2 weeks. It was incredible. We have probably, 20,000 WhatsApp messages over the past 2 weeks to get this happen. So well done, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Min Tun. So that really just leaves me, by way of final wrap-up, to thank you all coming. It has been an absolute pleasure on behalf of Castle Asia and on behalf of Britcham to be associated with this BVT Technology event. It is absolutely fantastic that this is now reinstated in the calendar, and we do hope it will become an annual event that will grow in significance and grow in relevance, and will be real thought leadership for everybody involved in the digitalization and technology space. Thank you all for joining us. Best wishes to BVT.